think tonight is really a critical night because for all the years that everything has been in play and all of the events that were taking place almost 2 decades ago, everything used to be in the future tense. But I want to encourage people to really listen with their hearts to what's being said, because people have become desensitized to the reality. And I'll share this. I believe that the words, and these are just a few of them, collapse, crisis, panic, cataclysm, financial meltdown, day of reckoning, all those words have lost their meaning due to overusage and due to MK Ultra. Now, I want to share this. It's critical that those of you who have not been to my website tonight or today, go and look at the MK Ultra background. You must understand how that has come about. Most people, Doug, and you know this, Ross and Joe, you encounter it every day, they just don't understand how the country could have come to this point. They don't understand, how do I say this? They don't understand the full ramifications of the lifestyle. I'm really choosing my words carefully, you guys. The lifestyle, everything that we've known as normal, everything we've taken for granted, most importantly, the living God, all the blessings we have received at the hands of a living God and a loving living God, the enemy of men's souls hates that. You know, when Jesus said the love of money is the root of all evil, he didn't say money was the root of all evil. He even told us to make friends of the unrighteous mammon so that when God gave us the true riches, we know how to handle it. It's interesting that faithfulness in the small things carries through into faithfulness in large things. What Ross is going to talk about tonight, and I'll chime in, is the fact that there are events taking place that even if you put them into the context of 2008, the last, really crisis period, every single event that led to the economic collapse, I believe the disintegration of small business started then, and now the Baltic Dry Index, Ross will explain all that. What we're seeing is God bringing the nation to a standstill. Retail is finished. It's over as you've known it. McDonald's, closed 1,000 stores, Walmart, 269 stores. And by the way, that's a number we'll deal with later in the show. But what we're seeing is the Illuminati signature all across the world. Global upheaval. Let me make this simple. Every nation state is to disappear, to be turned into a specific region. As Michael Savage has brilliantly said over and over, borders, language, culture, national identity is being merged into this giant globular cluster called the New World Order. And anyone who doesn't take the Luciferic initiation, according to David Spangler, gets to be murdered. You won't enter into this New World Order without that, initiation. So I'm going to turn it over to Ross, but ladies and gentlemen, I want you to understand what's at stake here. Those of you who are parents and have kids, their futures. Those of you who are grandparents and have grandchildren. And this isn't doom porn. The Lord rebuked those people that use that word. Whenever people can't handle the ramifications of what they have denied, the only way they can respond emotionally, and certainly not intellectually, is to attack the messengers. Everything Ross and I will talk about tonight is a matter of record, but think about this. Think about how many times you've heard the word collapse, crisis, panic, yet all of that doesn't mean anything to the majority of people in the United States. Now, obviously, it means something to preppers and people who understand the wise man sees evil coming and hides himself from it. So, Ross, let's go immediately now to the things that you absolutely are seeing that you've never seen before. And obviously, your goal is to help people get out of financial harm's way. But if they choose to get run over by a steamroller, that's their decision. Go ahead, Ross.
Thanks, Steve, and thanks, Doug and Joe, for having me on the show tonight. Steve, you're dead on. And when you're talking about desensitizing folks to words, and that's intentional by a lot of ways. If you see enough movies with murder or you play video games with murder, it becomes nothing to you until you actually see a dead body. So what we're facing is with the general public is what's called normalcy bias. And it's everything what you've been told all your life. It's what you hear on the TV set, you hear on the radio, movies. Everybody thinks everything is hunky-dory, when in fact it's not. And so the next step from that is going into what's called cognitive dissonance, and that's where your whole balloon goes up, and it's sort of taking the red pill in the matrix. And that's what I use many times when I'm talking to our customers is you're going through the matrix mode of taking the red pill, and it's not what you think it is. And it many times will make people's heads pop, and they just can't deal with it. And so when you start moving from normalcy bias to cognitive dissonance, some people move ahead and break through and learn, and they become awake. Others fall back and say, I just can't deal with it. That's not true. I'm going to just ignore it and get back to my six-pack and my TV shows. And so hopefully the listeners tonight will break through the normalcy bias and face the cognitive dissonance, but we have to tell them, because there's a lot of different moving parts. And every time I say this every time I come on the show is there's a lot of different pieces. All of them individually mean nothing, but when you weave them into a macrame or you weave them into a tapestry, it comes and gives you a full picture. And so I just want to start hitting some things and things that people recognize right away, and that's the price of oil. And so until now, the oil was down at 28 and some change, 28.78 on the West Texas, and then the Brent was even lower. It's popping up and down, but it's still staying. The resistance still is back at 30. So many people are saying the oil is going to go down to 20, to 15, to 10, and so people go, oh yay, the gas pump's going to be less. And there's actually stations in Michigan who are selling gas today in the 70 cents to 80 cents in a price war, which you haven't seen since the 60s and 70s. So people are selling gas for, in some places, 55 cents to 65 cents a gallon, unheard of. I haven't seen that since I was in the 78 in high school. So everything, that's awesome, but they don't realize what that does from a ripple effect within the economy. All of this, up until recently, when the oil started to take a major slide at the middle of last year, we were almost energy independent. I would say for 36 months, we were probably energy independent because all the shale and everything was pumping. We were actually ready. That's why they passed the bill for Texas and other states to export oil directly and not having to go through a centralized place. Individual states could now export their own oil, which is going to be a boon for Texas. And so now with this bust, it's changed all the rules. And so we were almost energy independent, or were for a short period of time. Then the Saudis put their pressure on, and then we were trying to play the strategy that, oh yeah, well, the Russians are using the oil pricing to build up their military, and so we're at a de facto state of war with them, essentially, in another Cold War, or I would call it a colder war, because I think back in those days we had what was called mutually assured destruction. That doctrine is way out the window, and Putin's already said he has no problem using a first strike to take care of business. So now we're in even a colder war, and now they think, well, we're going to destroy them with bringing their oil revenues down. But nobody, either they intentionally or in cahoots with Middle Eastern countries, they brought this number down, and the break-even price for shale oil is probably around $50, depending on the operator. It could be as low as 30 for some of the more efficient ones. So now you have oil companies going belly up. I can tell you in Texas, where we are, at the height back in the early 15, there was 190 rigs running across the state of Texas. Today there are 60 or less, and they're dropping day by day. And so you think about that, and that impacts not just the oil rigs and the workers on the rigs. That's unemployment right there. But there's people that provide water, people provide piping, trucking, housing, food, all kinds of other administrative kind of things. And all those people are pretty much out the window too. If you used to see a boomtown driving down towards Corpus or towards Laredo over the last 2 years, you couldn't believe the amount of building. You couldn't swing a dead cat without hitting some kind of rig or some kind of oil industry-related new building, including what I would call shanty-type houses for these guys to live in that were thrown up so quickly while they were building something more permanent. And now all those businesses are gone. All those little towns are sucking wind. The state is not getting those tax revenues. And that's not just happening in Texas. It's happening in North Dakota, in Oklahoma. Many where the boom areas, it's bust now. So the unemployment is huge. But take it a step further and think of all the money that was lent to make that expansion. The banks have huge books of business in the oil industry. The Texas banks, North Dakota banks, large banks, Wells Fargo, J.P. Morgan Chase, Wachovia, Bank of America is a big one. So all of these big banks took huge risks and said, well, there's a lot of money to be made. And there was, and people made a lot of money. I was talking to a friend today. He has a gentleman that he works with, or as a friend of his, was made $850,000 last year just in royalty checks alone, plus his leases. Now he's looking for a job. So this has a huge impact on everybody. But think about the bank. So you lend a bunch of money now that, and there was a law, I'll digress just for a second. There was a law passed called mark to market. And so it essentially, it started in 2009 and it pretty much came to fruition in October of 2015, just when the thing started to collapse. And so now the oil companies used to be able to use the reserves that are in the ground. They know that they have X million barrels of oil in this particular well. That is considered collateral because it's a reserve. They're going to pump it out of the ground eventually over some period of time, and the banks could use that as collateral. When this rule came up and they actually were able to, they took it away and said that collateral no longer exists. So now the oil company has a collateral issue. It's almost like a margin call that said, well, you need to do something to bring this collateral back up in order to keep this loan active, or they're going to make them default. And so now we're looking at numerous companies defaulting or actually have defaulted. I know one bank in South Texas that has a major client or a major loan holder, and they're like 40% of their book of business. This one's is just about to go belly up. What would that do if you lost 40%? You took a loss on 40% of your loan book. What would that do to your bank? Probably bring it down to its knees and close it. So these things have a ripple effect. It's almost like the mortgage business of 2008, except it's worse because it's broader spectrum. It's not just housing mortgages. It affects a lot of people and a lot of ripples. So with this, that means that with the latest banking of in 2010, where they passed a law, there is no more bailouts. Everything is a bail-in. You can see the writing on the wall. So if the banks are going to collapse, and the Fed passed in December their latest minutes that they adopted those new laws so that the Fed can't do bailouts any longer, so their hands are tied behind their back. So they can't suddenly just issue a bunch of money to all these big banks to cover their losses, theoretically anyway. That's how the law is written. But he who has the gold makes the rules, so if they could obviously change that, we just heard I read a story on Zero Hedge today and yesterday, it's ongoing, where the Dallas Fed has said that with these big losses on your books, and this is met with a bunch of Dallas with a bunch of Texas banks and others, saying, well, don't make them go to foreclosure, don't make them default, do things like sell their assets, do something else. If the last step here is ignore the mark to market price, so which means that they can bring that equity back up and those reserves back up, that will cover for the short term. So the shell game, this 3-card Monte, is working again, just like it did in 2008. Again, except it's going to be much worse. So Steve, my biggest concern right now is, well, one of them is the oil, and it's the unemployment that goes along with it. The government just released. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, Rob. I thought you were finished. Go ahead.
So the next thing is that affects unemployment. So one of the things I keep track of is the unemployment rates, because you see, well, unemployment's at 5%. Then you see you dig into the numbers, and the number of the population that's employed is employed or is actually part of the workforce is as lowest level some studies. And so you go and dig deeper, and there's two different numbers. There's a U3 number and a U6 number. The U3 number is what they always publicize at 5%. And so most people can look this up. Look up U3 versus U6 on Google it or whatever browser or you search it you want to use. But if you look at that, the U3 number is 3%. People that are actively involved when they do their 33,000 calls and they talk to all these folks. 5% of the people said they're unemployed. But you take that, the actual U6 number, which people that are only part-time workers because they can't find a full-time job or they have a second job for economic reasons, they've given up hope, they're even just remotely attached to the employment situation, That number is at 9.9. It was in 12 and 13. It was in the 12. It was in the 18% range, 20% range. So it's come down significantly. But just think about it. 1 in 10 people, conceivably, at 10%, is unemployed. So what does that, to your point earlier, retail, what does that do to retail? Walmart's stores, McDonald's is closing, 1,000 stores, Gap is closed. All these different companies, all these retailers had a terrible December. That big push in December didn't happen. Amazon had a great year, relatively speaking, to the retail, to the brick and mortars, but the folks that the overall retail is in the tank. So people aren't spending their money. Their debt is going up. So again, we're just getting right back into that 2008 cycle, Steve and Doug, that is not good. So we're going to get to like the Lehman Brothers, Bear Stearns kind of situation, except it's going to be caused by something different. It's a global shutdown with China, which I'll get to in a moment. But oil is a huge thing. I mean, it's pushing us towards deflation, which is bad for everybody, and it's really hard to get out of. So, Steve, did you have a comment? I'll go ahead and turn it over to you for a moment.
Yeah. I think that one of the most critical and telling numbers is not statistics or charts, Ross. It's the Baltic Dry Index. The Baltic Dry Index is just a composite, a tabulation, if you will, of how many ships are coming in with freight, how many ships are coming in importing products in this country, obviously products going out of this country and exports. But one of the telling things about the Baltic Dry Index is basically, I'll make this stand, how it filters through to the trucking industry. Now, truckers understand it. I get truckers' emails every day. I have a lot of truckers that listen to this program, either real downloaded or wherever they're at. But the point is that they can't deliver goods. Well, we've become a service-oriented society. Listen, a PhD in whatever venue of education, he's got to feed his family too, just as a plumber or a carpenter or any of the builders, people who actually add value. So when you see the Baltic Dry Index going lower, and we were speculating, ladies and gentlemen, that we wouldn't be surprised to see at 322, which is obviously, Doug said that, the Illuminati number, and I said I wouldn't be surprised if it's 333. So still falling today. What was it, Ross? 369?
Right, 369 as of the start of this program, which was down from 373 on Friday when I looked it up, which was down
now,
the high of this last.
Yeah, let me just go there really quick. Look at this. I want you to see, and ladies and gentlemen, this is about teaching. Ross is the guy who's going to give you the financial stuff. But notice 369, notice the 69. Notice how many Walmart stores are closing. 289. Why not 270? Why not 250? No. Look at this. Look at David Bowie. David Bowie, basic, really into the black arts, really into Satanism. His newest album, Black Star. Black Star directly relates also to the Nazis' Black Sun. Now, what's critical, and then Alan Rickman, the actor who was in Harry Potter, he also died at 69. Okay? They all died, both of them died at 69. So the point is no. Yeah, so there's a 69. Now, I want to share something, okay? And I want people to know that there are a lot of people that come on the scene. I'm going to turn it right back after you after I read a certain segment. In 1992, June 27th, I received a word from the Lord. Now, the way you know if a word is from the Lord, you take it to the Lord and you see if it's fulfilled. The problem with Christians is they think if a word is given, a word is given, that if it doesn't come to pass in the immediate future, that's not a true word. And listen to this, okay? And this is on my website in the Prophetic Words. It's in the 1992. The government of your land worships at the altars of Mammon. The evil they do is an affront to my righteousness and an attack on my throne. And now hear their judgment. In one day I will bring down their financial system. The entire world will stand in awe.
The politicians will run to and fro, unable to do anything to stop the onslaught of my judgment. Your country will come to a virtual standstill. No planes will fly. No trucks will run. No trains will run. As food runs out, millions will flee the cities as drought and famine begin to take hold. Total chaos will ensue. Panic will break forth, and there will be much death and sorrow. Those who fall in the sea, and those who fall in the sea, as they die, plague will break forth and pestilence will follow. Millions will wander your highways and byways searching for food just to continue living. Now, that's 28 years ago. 28 years ago. And 1992, 2000, 24 years ago. There's an earlier one that I got confused on, 1987. So the point is that what I'm trying to say, Ross, Doug, and Joe, that's going to come to pass. And everybody's too busy to even begin to imagine the fact, or would not even acknowledge that was, quote, a true word of the Lord. Now, people can say, I don't believe it. Well, fine, you don't. But the point is, it's going to come to pass. So I think the critical word here that I can't articulate, maybe you can, Doug or Joe, jump in, or Ross, the word panic. Okay, the word panic is such a word that you'd think it would be it wouldn't be necessary to try and define it. Because of the overuse of it and the numbing and dumbing of the desensitization of it, people don't get it. Doug, do you want to describe? Here's a good thing, and Ross, I hope you don't mind, but Doug, when I say the word panic, or Joe, chime in after your dad, what do you think of? What is the mental picture you get?
Oh, Steve, chaos. But Ross said something extremely important, I think. You can say, you can talk about murderous statistics all day long, and until you actually see or have been at a murder scene, it doesn't register. I mean, it's just a thing. It's a number. It's a concept. So panic, to me, and I'll toss it to Joe after this, to me is something that you are caught chaos, that you've got no control over. You're a pinball in the pinball machine, and let me tell you something, it ain't fun.
And I'll piggyback off what my dad said, except I'll classify it in two ways. You have the individual panic, where one person's in a situation that is panicking for whatever threat they're facing, or you have mass panic, which is societal chaos, which is what my father was explaining, where you're basically a pinball caught in a wave of things going on around you that are unstable, and your life's in danger. It's a serious situation.
I would add the word pandemonium.
There you go.
Mm-hmm. Complete pandemonium. Think of the riots in the Northeast and in Missouri and things like that times 10, where it's every man for himself. I know many of you played sports, or not sports, but just playing outside when you were growing up. But you say that, I'm sure it's politically correct to say that somebody killed a man with a football. So when you're just, everybody's out for themselves and trying to win, that's panic, where you're just looking at your three children. I'm hungry, Mommy. I'm hungry, Daddy, but you have nothing to give them. So what are you going to do? That pressure will make your head pop. So you're going to go out and secure those, whatever you need to feed your family, or to give them water, or if they need medication. You'll do anything and everything to protect your loved ones.
Absolutely.
Up to and including whacking somebody with whatever weapon you may have, or you may have guns, or you may have a knife, or you may have a baseball bat, or whatever it's going to take for you to acquire that which you need. And on the other end of that, somebody's going to have the same, well, you're not going to come and get mine, pound sand, go away. And then that will ensue into a physical altercation, but on a very large scale. So that's when you talk about that panic, Steve. If you think about, there's old movies that show panic scenes and people running, and you'll remember a movie that was back in the 80s, I think it was The Day After, and it showed these people running down the street because the nukes were coming, or went off, and people were running, or the sirens were going up, and they were just running over each other, backing into cars, backing over people, just trying to flee like scared sheep and goats. And so that's what panic really means, but nobody's really experienced that here. Think about 9/11, the panic in New York City. That created just a complete sucking of the air out of the room, literally and figuratively. So that gets us to, and Steve, I'll bring us back around to the Baltic Dry Index. That number 369 is the 52-week range, to tell you where we are, the 52-week range just since January now to January of last year, it was at 1222 this time, or during the period, that 1 year period is the high. Today it's 369. It's probably going to continue to go down. So that it means all the iron ore, coal, shipping containers full of merchandise that none of us really need anymore. It does not include oil. That's a separate measure. So, but all of the dry goods, could be wheat, could be corn, could be a litany of things that's moving. It tells you how many ships are moving between all the different countries around the world. That's global trade. Global trade has come to a stop. And what's causing that is there is an underlying credit crunch, just like there was in 2008, except it's getting worse because they're running out of ammo in their quiver, arrows in their quiver. So the money that each of the company are trying to hold on to their cash, billionaires are stocking up on cash. Sovereign countries are sitting on cash. So they don't want to release it because they know they're going to need it. And I would suggest that to our listeners that they need to have cash or liquidity in their own homes as well, but that's another topic. So to your point, Steve, panic is not just something you see on a TV show when the blob comes running through your house, or there's some other TV show where you're getting whacked in a video game. Panic is real, and it's bloody and it's awful. You actually feel it, and that adrenaline, that rush, that's the fight or flee, comes running through you. You'll never know what real panic is.
And again, the word, I think the thing that what people lose track of in all these warnings are to motivate you to act in your own behalf. Doug, years ago, and being one of the guys who started the PrEP movement, 25, actually 30 years ago, the thing is that I coined the term life assurance, okay? Because everybody knows what life insurance is. So what Ross is trying to get across to everybody, and I am too, and I'm praying that we communicate so clearly, is that there's nobody coming to the rescue. They intend, the globalists tend to introduce maximum mayhem. And maximum mayhem can be this. And the best way I can describe it, Ross, and I'll share this, Doug, I think I have, and Joe, is that most people, when they're in a difficult situation, they either have something coming from them, before them, in other words, in front of them, from behind them, from the side of them, from either side, right or left side. And now, in this day and age, with everything from the earthquakes that are happening, the volcanic explosions, the subduction zone issues on, the Washington, Oregon coast, all of the things coming. Now it's like this. Here's how I would describe it, you guys. You look ahead of you, and you see events that are approaching with the speed of a freight train. You look behind you, and there are people chasing you, literally for your life, for your substance, and for whatever, quote, prepping supplies. You look to the right, you look to the left, and you look up above, you look beneath, and all that stuff. And at that point, who are you going to call? Ghostbusters? The Bible in Jeremiah, and this is a cool thing, basically God says to people, when you're confronted with that which is greater than you are, how are you going to deal with the swelling of Jordan and basically the armies that are coming behind you? In other words, he's saying, when you're cut off from all places to run to, when you're cut off from sustenance, who are you going to look to? Well, the answer to that is the living God, okay? Because I want to make it clear tonight, what we're laying out to you, you should see not as doom and gloom. You should see it as this. You should see it that God has made his position clear, that he loves his creation. If the wisest guy in the world says, is Solomon, the wise man sees evil coming and hides himself from it, what Ross just said to everybody, listen, let me make it clear. They have passed the laws that everything in banks is now theirs. Is that correct, Ross?
Yes. Yes.
Will you explain the difference between an insured depositor and an unsecured lender, please? I don't think 90% of people out there know that the law's changed, and explain that if you would.
Sure. I mean, the law passed, it was in 2010, and essentially before that law, you were an insured depositor, meaning that you were what I would call a liability on their balance sheet, so that they had to pay you. You were secured. You would always get your money out. You put the money in the bank, they owed it back to you. Now you are an unsecured creditor, meaning that when you put your money in, let's say you go and deposit a check for $1,000, that money now belongs to the bank. It says your name on it. It's essentially an IOU now. So I will promise to pay you back that money when you want it. So that along what's called a DDA account, a demand deposit account, that title hasn't changed. But what it means, though, is that you're an unsecured creditor, meaning that you gave the money to the bank. Essentially, you loaned it to them, and they're going to give you a basis point or 2 basis points for your checking account, paying you interest on it. And so, but if you want that money and they don't have it, they can say, no, you can't have it. So if the bank does a bail-in, meaning that they're going to take your deposits, they could give you a haircut like they did in Greece, and you have no recourse. So many people have probably got new statements in the mail saying, here's your new terms of your deposit account. They changed all the write-ups in all the major banks that I know. At least I know they did at Chase when I worked there, and other banks. So nobody reads those terms. Nobody even looks at it until somebody tells them that now you're an unsecured creditor. So people that are ahead of you are other banks and the Fed and major corporations, whoever that can or ahead of you in line. You're sort of at the bottom of the barrel. So when they get down to the bottom, they'll pay you if they can. Now they all say, well, you have FDIC insurance up to $250,000. Now that's true, you do have that, but when the funding authority for that only has enough to really fund that, maybe 1 or 2% of that number, you're left holding the bag. So if they do a bail-in like Greece, you really have nothing you can do about it. You're going to get a haircut. So in the event that these oil loans and other oil-related industry loans, could be for rigs, it could be for trucks, could be for piping, paying bills, paying payroll. When those loans go belly up, guess who's holding the bag? Not just the banks, but you are holding the bag now, because you are unsecured creditor to the oil industry as well, because your money was used to lend to them and expecting a nice return, and they would make their spread and pay you your 2 or 3 basis points and make money and show great profits in each quarter. So, but that's in the worst case scenario, everybody's holding the bag anymore. The bigger difference, you were a liability versus a creditor. So before you were required to be paid, now you don't have to be paid. You're secondary.
So, Steve,
I hope that helps.
So let me add this to put it into perspective for everyone. That means that if there are deals on the books, meaning banks are speculating, banks are investing, anything that causes the bank to have a loss, you are proportionately responsible for that loss. Is that accurate?
Yes.
And so
that was the Dodd-Frank Act. That was the Dodd-Frank Act, if people want to look it up.
Yep. So the point that I guess that's really critical right now is to understand that that's a huge change. Yet, you know what? I explain that to a lot of people. Some of them are mutual clients, Rob, and some of them get it. But you know, when I talk to the average person, they shrug their shoulders. They shrug their shoulders. And so when we're talking about, look, jobs, the crashing of the oil and coal business, hello, does anybody think that's going to be good for this country? The fallacious lies that somehow ethanol would save this country, or wind energy, or solar, hello, does anybody get it? So I guess the thing is, it's kind of this. You can either put your hands in the lying, adulterous, perverse system, or you can start to take control of your own lives. I can tell you this, after being, however long I've been on talk radio, and Doug, I'm sorry, this is a bad attitude, but I don't even care anymore. I've just gone through, and Todd, you'll appreciate this, buckets and buckets of the CDs and tapes that, you've gone through to get up my archives. When they come up, we'll tell people those are all the shows I've ever done. And, what you look at, Doug, and you'll do this in retrospect someday too, or Joe will, or whoever, follows you. And I'm not speaking about an untimely death, but same thing with you, Ross. What we leave to the next generation, the Bible says they served their generation well. The Bible talks about those who pillage their generation. How many years, Ross, have others, you included me, been saying, we're literally eating up our children and grandchildren's future? But that people don't understand. You want to comment on that? I think what I'm trying to do, Ross, is get people to understand it is their short a short span of time. So go ahead and answer that if you wouldn't mind.
Sure. I mean, the fact that the amount of debt that we have in this country is unsustainable. For instance, the 19 going on $20 trillion that was pushed through, hammered through by the anointed the anointed Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan, and then gave everything to Obama just like Harry Reid would have. So that $20 trillion debt is unpayable. I mean, there's unserviceable. So when you start to see them creeping up interest rates, you start to see treasury rates can't service that debt. So when we spin ourselves into oblivion, that's essentially saying, okay, when I die, I'm going to leave you $300,000 worth of debt to my children, but you need to pay that off because I don't care because I'm dead anyways. You guys need to pay it off. And that's essentially what we're doing. So instead of leaving your children an inheritance and a nest egg and a college education for your grandkids or your great-grandkids or a beach house or whatever you think you want to leave to them, what the government is doing it to you is that they're essentially tying the hands of your children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren at this point to a point of slavery where they're never going to be able to pay this debt back. So I have 25, 30 years, God willing, to live longer at my age. But after that, my kids take it on and my grandkids take it on and they take it on. It'll never get paid back. So we've enslaved ourselves with debt, and nobody really seems to care. That's just like falling on deaf ears. That's that normalcy bias. Well, there's nothing we can do about it. And they embrace different candidates that talk the talk and say this different thing, but nothing ever changes. We vote different people in. We're going to stop this, but they just grease the skids and move it on. Everybody gets co-opted and does the same thing. So in the revolving door between corporations and government and financial and banks and Treasury Department, how many, you can go and look at how many times has the Treasury Secretary in the modern era not been a Goldman Sachs employee formally, either a chairman or a senior vice president or some investment banker. Big piece of Goldman Sachs has always been the next Treasury. Bernie Sanders said, no, Goldman Sachs will not be my Treasury Secretary if I get elected. So he must say that for a reason. I'm not proposing it. I'm not, for any of these candidates. But at the end of the day, we have to think through what we're doing. What are you leaving the next generation? If you're selfish and narcissistic and you don't care, well, I can't help you. But if you want to be altruistic and you want to help your children, you want to help your neighbor and your community, things need to change. And can you change it at the $20 trillion level? Probably not. You can probably change it for your family, for your friends and your church members and neighbors and things, but you can't do it on a global scale. It's just you don't have the wherewithal. So that's where people say, well, they shrug their shoulders. You said, Stephen, there's nothing I can do about it. You can do it at a micro level. You can't do it at the macro level necessarily unless there's a groundswell of people voting somebody that can make it through the gauntlet to get to where they could even become president or be somebody in Congress where you thought you did, but they get co-opted. How do you change that? It's beyond my pay grade. I don't know how to change that. I wish I could tell folks how to do that. You can vote at the polls, but if you can't get somebody to vote for, that's not going to carry the flag on, you got no shot. So it can be frustrating, but you can do it at a micro level in your own sphere of influence in your home and your neighbors and community.
And I think that leads into the whole Chinese issue because, again, Doug, Joe, if we look back over everything that's been on talk radio for the past quarter of a century, that I've been talking about, others have been talking about, it's not that it's about those of us who have been doing it. It's about we're at the place now where when the Pope talks about a one-world religion, people want to argue, well, he doesn't really mean that. When he puts up a high-quality production, he really does mean that. People have to rethink when they're talking about a global ID card. We can't do anything, Ross. Here's a proverb. And I love quoting Solomon before he, went wacky, but he said, if the foundations be destroyed, what can the righteous do? And I'm telling you, here's the problem. Here's the disconnect. And I'll turn it right over to you, Ross, to go into the Sino-American economic war. The fact is that the foundations of this country are destroyed. The very principles embodied in the Star-Spangled Banner. Yet people still shake their head. They get all caught up in the politics, and yet they don't recognize this. You can't build something new on a foundation that's crumbled. So the Sino-American economic war of attrition That's what's going on right now, and China is calling the U.S. bluff. Vladimir Putin is demonstrating, he's a man of action, not a man of par 4 golfer. I don't know anything about golf. Forgive me, golfers. So, foreign policy can't be won, and military decisions can't be made on a whim. Yet that's what's happening. Listen, America is self-destructing. People yell at me when I say that. I can challenge anybody who can tell me. It's fascinating. Let's say some guy has 100 dreams, 100 visions every, week, and he posts them. And yet, they're as dire as what we say, but when we say them, somehow it's selling fear to sell this, that, or the other thing. Well, let me share this. When you buy life insurance, you go out and you spend whatever it takes to cover your family in the case of your untimely demise, or you know that your time is up, because you care about them, you care about the next generation. That's gone. And now China, the history of China is a fascinating study, because, we go back to 76, you go back to China, you can deal with dynasties that are 2,000 years old, where they understood the basics of what money is. And when the Chinese tried to print silk money, guess what? Those guys didn't last very long. So let's talk right now, the Sino-American economic war. Ross, I'll turn it right over to you, because, again, the Chinese are buying up everything pretty much on the West Coast.
And Steve.
Right, all over the country.
And Steve and Russ, if I could jump in here, the president said something during the State of the Union. He said something, and I'm paraphrasing, along the lines of, anybody who says we're in an economic downturn is peddling fiction. What do you have to say to that?
No, I consider the State of the Union fiction as well, but that's okay.
Well, let me say this. I'm not the one on a blue bicycle eating an ice cream cone with a crash helmet on while Vladimir Putin is diving into the Black Sea. Or, look, I'm not just saying this. I'm saying the world's perception of that guy that you just named is one of weakness and freakness. Now, the thing is that the total disrespect that the world, and I went on your show years ago and talked about that the United States would become a hissing in the nostrils of those countries around about. There are even headlines using those terms. I'm not saying they're listening to us. I hope they are. But, so what I'm saying, Joe, is that is as relevant, okay, is a vampire saying, I've switched from blood to water. It doesn't fit. It doesn't fit. And he certainly doesn't believe that, because, look, the only thing that gives the power to even make an insane statement like that is the power of the printing press. The rest of the world, Ross is going to deal with it. China, Russia, they don't want the U.S. dollar. They're not dealing with it. Saudis, they're not dealing with it anymore. So this whole idea of crashing oil prices, the whole idea of China buying all the gold, and I think too, Ross, it's fascinating that when you're quoting The Art of War, China's not going to tell the world how much gold they have until they're ready to revalue it. So go ahead and talk about China, because I don't think the average American even can fathom what it means when China is doing, or what it means as China is doing what it's doing. Go ahead, sir.
Sure. The big day is tomorrow, actually, Tuesday. The Chinese are going to release their GDP for 2015. They've been I guess, posturing it or framing it as it's going to be in the 6.7 range. But they also do overnight devaluations of their currency, which unsettles the entire world economy. If it's anything less than that, which many people I read and I talk to think it's going to be in the 3 to 4% range, it really is. They may say it's 6, but it really is 3. And the reason I believe that is I have a customer that lives in China as an expat. He does business over there, and I set up an account. He moved his retirement money out many months ago, and really glad he did, actually. But he travels all over the country, and I'm going to read you verbatim what he said in his email to me. He goes, the thing that it continues to amaze me is the construction here in China. In the area where I live, about 900 acres, they are about 75% complete on 25 new 30-story high-rise buildings, all empty, probably on 7 acres. He goes, I can stand at this location and view similar projects within a mile. He does a lot of travel by train. He sees it all over the place in China. And he says the locals look at him in a blank stare like, who the hell is going to buy these things? So what's actually happening, and it just dawned on me after I read his email, and then I thought about it and just had an epiphany. I don't know, maybe on Friday, it came to me. Drives GDP. If you're building construction and you're using up all these materials and you're building these buildings and putting up these homes, and even though there's nobody to live in them, that's creating GDP. So it's false GDP, but it can say they're using it for that. And so by faking the numbers and just building up empty buildings that they could just, I guess, go back and knock down again, then and rebuild them again, there's your GDP. And so it just baffles me. And this is eyewitness. That was verbatim from an eyewitness in China, an American. So that kind of thing tells me that the dew is off the rose. There was more to the eye than that's being either seen or told. And I'm because of the number of the way the market is going, the capital flee from China. And back in October, I told this audience that the Chinese will get their SDR. And there was a lot of finagling and back when there was a bunch of shots over the bow during the months ensuing before the December decision. But I said that they're doing the Fed's going to raise the rates, and they did a quarter point. Like we a lot of money from China is moving in onshore here, and as Steve said, they're buying anything and everything that's not nailed down on the West Coast, on the East Coast, in the belts, in the farm belts, everywhere. They're buying stuff as much as they can, because they know that the shoe's going to drop. They want hard assets, just like we tell people they need to get hard assets. They're not putting it in renminbi. They're not putting it in dollars. They're exiting out of all that and putting into hard assets, things that's going to be productive, like farmland or places where people have to live. So they're exiting, and they've had to put so many capital controls, and the Chinese had a great way of moving money around into different areas and move the money. It's almost like money laundering around their different areas and then getting out of the country. Numerous billionaires have disappeared. In China, they just suddenly disappeared. You have the person that's running the stock market in China is their call for his resignation. He's offered his resignation. I haven't heard whether he took it or not. But you see this huge volatility in China, dropped off several $1 trillion of money out of the Chinese market, in which obviously equates to people. And so everybody's getting really irritated, like you told us. And then they have people locked in that can't even sell their holdings because they told you can't sell it because it's going to bring the market down. So what if let's say that you owned 1,000 shares of Exxon, and you'd see it tanking from 250 to 2 to 150 to 1. You're trying to get out. They said, no, you can't sell it, and you watch your money just drip away down to $20. So that's where these people are locked in. So the folks in China are the individual, just like you and I and Joe and Doug and their listeners, are just pawns in this, because there's much bigger, more nefarious powers involved that are playing this big game of petrodollar. What essentially this is coming to, because there's this whole war of attrition I've been talking about since, I guess, May of last year, is heated up to the point where it's destroying both sides. It's that mutual assured destruction aspect is coming about. Our market's taking hits. The Chinese markets are taking a hit. The other Asian markets are taking a hit. Oil's taking a hit. Gold, on the other hand, has come back down, but it's still moving back up again. So it's going to start balancing. Now, gold is manipulated just like anything else. Steve, you can attest to this. But and I'm digressing a little bit from China, but they're big buyers of gold, and you were talking about the gold hoards that they have. You can watch Americans as the price of gold goes up, people chase it going up, and I think, Steve, you and I have talked about this a couple of times. People chase the price of gold going up and ignoring it as it going down, saying that's a bad investment, when they have it completely reversed. So what happens is gold has run up. It's probably run up to I think it's at 1188, 1190 right now. I can guarantee you in 3 or 4 days it's going to drop again by $15 or $20, because the people that are running it up are shorting it on the other end. So people chase the gold up. The banksters and the people that are manipulating the market short it. They make a ton of money. Then they run it up again. It's like an O-scope. You can actually plot this on a graph. You're almost creating a sine wave of lead up and short, lead up and short. So I just want everybody to be cautious, because the Chinese are doing the same thing, and you're wondering where I'm going with this. But at the end of the day, you have falsities everywhere in the economy, whether it's Chinese or in the Americas or in Canada. The Canadians are suffering big time because of their exchange rate against the dollar. So the Chinese and the Russians are saying, look, we're tired of the American game and the homogeneity of the Americans. We're tired of Americans just printing dollars because of the petrodollar from the 70s. So the Chinese and the Russians have created these boards where they can trade in yuan and they can trade in rubles. Putin said last week that no bank should make any transfer for oil, any other commodity in dollars whatsoever. The Chinese are doing the same thing. So now that the yuan is going to be in the SDR, more and more countries are accepting the yuan as a reserve currency and being able to trade directly with yuan versus having to go through the SWIFT system and transfer one currency to dollars and then dollars into this other currency. They're cutting out the middleman altogether, which just adds more pressure to the petrodollar, and they're trying to get rid of it. But so you have the Russians and the Chinese working to get rid of it. You have the Indians and South Africans and Brazilians, all the BRICS of setting up all this infrastructure to cut the dollar out. And when we come back from the break, I'll give you a real life story how gold from Dubai just disappeared. People thought it was ripped up or stolen. Turns out they used other currencies to move it and to sell it and to move it, and they avoided the American SWIFT system. They avoided the dollar, which was a huge coup, which was another chink in the armor. So that's all I got.
By the way, ladies and gentlemen, I've known Ross for over a decade. We started communicating that many years ago when he worked for one of the major banks, and he would always be spot on with his emails to me telling me what's going on behind the scenes. So he has a lot of connections, and that's what is important. This isn't him reading somebody else's newsletter. He will refer to it. But like I said, I've known him for a long time. Let's talk right now, if you don't mind. Let's talk about the stock market and why people focus on that. You know, they think the Dow is up and there's nothing in the shelves in the store, Ross. There's nothing being trucked. They start to notice shortages and everything. Explain, if you will, how the stock market is manipulated and the volatility is screaming at people, okay?
Sure. But before I get started, I just want to tell Doug I've used nuts.com and I bought stuff from them, and they do a great job. So I just want to plug them too because they do great. They have great products. So I just want to make sure I said that.
Thanks for that. And folks, you heard it. You heard it right from the economist himself, nuts.com. Okay, sir, go ahead.
So I wanted to talk about the stock market, and it's just one facet of things you look at it. We talked about the tapestry at the beginning of the show, and the stock market, which is manipulated and artificially inflated, and our government does the same thing that the Chinese do. They pour money into it to prop it up because, again, there's a certain amount of confidence that the market says, then people don't buy goods in the stores and retail clubs. So it's a vicious cycle, and it will just spin out of control. But let's talk a little bit about GDP in the United States, because we've mentioned China's gone announcing theirs tomorrow, and we'll find out where it goes. And I think the market's going to follow suit with that. If the Chinese GDP comes out and it's really strong, I think you'll see a bounce in the market. But then the fervor will go away and it'll back down again. But if you think about the numbers, so in 2015, these haven't come out from our government yet, the official GDP, and it always gets, after the news cycle goes by, they always lower it to a new estimate or actual numbers. They'll revise it. You'll always see it always gets revised downward. But in the third quarter of 2015, going into the fourth quarter, J.P. Morgan Chase, who's one of the top ones, and I used to work for them. They're really smart guys. I mean, I have to. Their CEO is a smart guy. The estimated Q4 2015, which is from October through December, they were looking at a GDP annualized at 2%. Then they revised it down to 1%, and then towards the end of the year, they said 0.1%. Okay, that's dead in the water. I mean, if you have to get 2% even to keep people working, so they revised it down to 1.1% is what they're estimating what it would be. So that shows you where retail is. That's why Walmart is closing stores. That's why McDonald's is closing stores. Sears is going to have a huge closure. They're going to be belly up in no time. So they're shuttering doors. All these retailers are shuttering their doors. Number one, they're getting beaten by the online folks because people just don't want to go out and fight the traffic and fight the crowds. They'd rather just order it, and the more efficient Amazon gets. And when you can get something from Amazon within 1 hour in your town, what's the point of going to the store and fighting and getting dressed and when you can order something in your pajamas and have it delivered to your house within 1 hour? So our GDP is for no better word, is in the tank. And so you'll see the numbers revised down, and people that are not working, and it correlates back to the 9-point number of unemployment, and you're starting to see layoffs in big banks. You're seeing layoffs in some startups, some big major people that are startups that are suddenly laying folks off that were supposed to be the bee's knees of technology. And what's causing a lot of that is that venture capitalists, I tend to call them, I've learned my own lesson on that, but the vulture capitals is where they're expecting a return on their money, not waiting years upon years saying profits coming, and their money sits there in the negative growth mode. Whereas before you had Facebook and Twitter and all these companies that were negative, and now they're starting to grow. Yeah, well, there's other startups, and people were patient with those startups, and there's a lot of other smaller ones that are coming that are pretty revolutionary technology-wise. Doesn't build community, doesn't help your neighbor, but it just makes you life as a supreme narcissist, makes you more important to others. But at the end of the day, these people that make money by loaning money, saying, I want to see some action now. And so you're seeing some major players. I meant to write down a couple of them, but I forgot to do that before the show. But some major players that you look it up online, or major players are laying off folks that they never thought they would, because they thought they'd just keep growing and growing and have the growth curve of Microsoft or Facebook or Twitter's laying off folks. And so you have people leaving these jobs not on their own free will, but because these capitalists, these vulture capital guys, want their return on the investment. And I can't blame them. I don't want to give my money to somebody that's going to take it and use it and not get me anything in return. They're there to make money. So that's the American way. So that's happening. So that tells you, that ties into the folks that have a lot of money are requiring action and requiring results. That tells you that they're not getting results. So they wouldn't be doing this if things were all peaches and cream. They're thinking that they have to squeeze the orange a little tighter to get more juice out of them. So that's just another one of the threads in the tapestry. Now you look at the stock market, and people look at it, well, this market here, the market there, and it goes down 3 straight, and it bounces up for 200 points, and then it comes back down again, and then the next finishes up maybe 100 points, and then the next day you'll see, I think it was Friday or Thursday, that the futures, I look at it like 3 o'clock in the morning, the futures are at down 500, down 400, then it comes back up again, then it's back down to, it's down 500, and this was Friday, so it ends the day at 390 down. So I expect we'll get a dead cat bounce tomorrow of some kind, depending on what's going to happen, probably early in the morning when they find out the Chinese numbers, and you'll see and if you look at the markets, you can go to a litany of different sites, CNBC, Yahoo Finance, Bloomberg, a litany of folks where you can actually see the futures market starting at around 10 to midnight. Then you'll see it through the morning until about 8 o'clock Central Time. And you'll watch those numbers if people are saying, I'm going to sell, I want to get out, or I'm going to buy. And so that affects your futures numbers. And so once that announcement by the Chinese comes about, you're going to see either a spike or direct falling like a stone, because everybody's got their expectations. And the stock market is all about expectations. It's not about reality. It's all about perception and expectations. So something I learned at the banks, to manage perceptions. You have to make people believe what you're saying. You have to make sure that they understand what you're trying to tell them and the way you're framing it up. And regardless of what the facts are, you have to set the perception that you're on the right side of it. So you're going to look at this and say, okay, well, the market's going to go up. And so we've lost, 12% since the beginning of maybe 10 to 12% since the beginning of the year. Worst start ever since the stock market numbers were tabulated. They've never had a first week like that ever. Even in 2008 and 2009, it wasn't that bad of a first week. Can you imagine that? So think about how bad 2008 and 2009 were, and look at where we are today. So 7 years later, which we're right at the end of that 7-year recession cycle, you're looking at 8 years if you count 2008 capitulation. So you look at that and say, okay, here we go. We're at that cycle where you can have a recession every 7 to 8 years, and there's that same O-scope or that same sine wave that's up and down. We're right on that edge, and so we're right there. But the difference between 2008 and today, and Joe, you mentioned it before the break, in 2008, in the midst of the complete catastrophe of the mortgage business, and I was in the thick of it then, Steve, you and I traded a lot of emails during that period, where people found smoking guns inside of banks, where they actually packaged deals that were really bad, and that's why one of the banks is no longer with us. But you look at that number, and the dry index was over 11,000. The Baltic dry index was over 11,000 in the midst of all of that catastrophe because trade kept still going, and there was things between countries. Now we're in the same situation with oil and a few other things, but the Baltic dry index is at 369. So that between that and the market's volatility, I mean, I can remember and this was long as I don't remember a time of period where other than 2008 where I just watched it go from down 400 points, down 500 points, down 600 points until we got to 6,000 or so where they finally bottomed out. Now we're seeing something so volatile that 1 minute you're thinking the market's up 200 points. You look back 2 hours later, and now we're down 100 points. So the sheep run to and fro across the spectrum, and you just don't know where you're going to land. And it drives people out of their minds. People that call me to say, what can I do with my money? How do I get out of this volatility? I feel like I'm in the casino. I'd rather go flush this 20 down the toilet than put it in the market because I know where it's going to end up regardless. So that's the kind of thing where I think the perception and then people just tired of it, and you'll hear the same talking head saying just it's play it out for the long term. It always will recover. It always will recover. Well, what if you took your money out before it bottomed out and then you put it back in after recoveries? You're going to be in much better shape than if you ran it through. So the adage of our parents and our grandparents saying just the stock market will be there, it always will be, and you just ride it out, doesn't exist anymore because the times are different. It's completely, and I don't know how to explain it in any clearer terms. This is not your grandfathers or your grandparents. Completely different. It's completely leveraged. Your grandparents or your parents didn't have derivatives to the tune of $640 trillion, bordering on some people say $1 trillion across the world. That could seize up all markets, and there's not enough money in the whole world, much less the galaxy, to fix this. So people need to understand that when you look at the market, you see it continue up and down, up and down. Either you want to play that game or you want to get into something else that's going to be more predictable and life-sustaining and things like that, and we can talk about that during the question and answer hour if we want to.
Well, and Ross, here's the thing, too. There are a lot of people listening in, and a time to move, if they're seeing the swings, we're seeing the swings in the stock market, people don't know where to go. So when someone gets a hold of you at survival401k, .com, okay, and they want to, will you explain simply, because I get emails about this all the time, explain the difference and why people can hold real estate, they can hold anything that's a tangible asset in their survival 401k, a self-directed 401k, and take possession of it. I have talked sometimes, you got to call Ross because, he sets us up for a lot of my clients, which, ladies and gentlemen, he does. But people have got to understand that, it's only a paper loss. No, every single financial asset can be put into two things. It can be put into a time value, the amount of time it took to build that value, and it can be put into calories. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what you pay for what when it comes to food, okay? You're paying for calories. The whole global New World Order is designing all their policies to limit you to be basically one step away from Soylent Green. Soylent Green was a movie with Charlton Heston in which when people died, and they made sure people died, they ground them into food wafers to the people. I guess you'd call them cannibal cookies. So there you go, Sheila, and those of you guys out there keeping track, cannibal cookies. So the point is that we're seeing right now people bewildered. So, okay, walk a person through. They say, okay, Mr. Powell, I want to take X, whatever X is. Tell me what a self-directed IRA is, and tell me, what I can put into it.
Sure. I mean, the average customer that calls me has between, some days it's 60,000, other days it's 200,000, 300,000 of customers with 10 million that they move. It's as little as 10,000. But so essentially what they do is they're moving their stock market-based retirement, which is typical spread of equities and mutual funds and ETFs and some stocks and things like that. That's, again, stuck is in Wall Street. And the thing most of them don't realize, and once I finish them, they do, is that the people selling you those securities and all those things make money on you going in and going out. So regardless whether you make money, you could take a loss year after year, but your person handling it is going to make money on you, either on a fee or on a transaction fee or an annual fee. They make money regardless of what happens to you. They can say they care about you, and many of them do. I'm not going to disparage a whole litany of people. There are some good ones and there's some really bad ones, just like anything else. Whether it's cops or firemen or radio hosts or whoever, there are good and they're bad. But the ones that I met are making money off of you just by putting your money in, turning your account and putting it in the stock and then putting in that one and reading their tea leaves and putting it over here. I mean, I've dealt with a couple here, especially in San Antonio, that are as like-minded as me and move their customers into things that are going to be safe and they're actually going to make money. They think the dollar's going to go down, they short the dollar. If they think it's going to go up, they short something else. So they don't just stick with this classic equities mix. So at the end of the day, people need to understand that if you made your money, you should be able to control a little bit better. And so with customers that come to me, we help them move their money out of the market, some or all. I mean, there's three legs to the stool that we talk about, and Steve and you and Doug and I think we've talked about this before. There's three things to every plan to make you successful. You need return of an investment, which would be wealth preservation, which would be gold, silver, real estate, things like that. You need return on investment, which is your growth engine to make sure that you don't stay static or lose money to inflation. And that's return on investment. And then you have liquidity, meaning that you need to be able to access your money when you need it. So you either can liquidate positions and things, or you can access the gold and silver to go and barter with, for instance. That's one of the cases. Or you can use your land to grow vegetables that you could eat, or all kinds of things. It could be hydroponics, it could be food stores, all those things. But those are things that you need to survive. And at the end of the day, you can't eat gold and silver. You can't eat paper dollars. You can't eat stock certificates, ETFs, all those things. You're going to get down to the point in the near future, I think 2016, 2017 is going to be where it's going to happen, is that you're going to get down to the basic needs of shelter, food, and water, and the comfort therein. So that if it's too hot, too cold, wherever you want to be able to keep yourself warm, keep yourself cool, feed yourself every day, feed your family. I would hope you would provision for your neighbors in some kind of tithing function, that you take care of folks that are not as well off as you, mind that they may come and try to take it, so you have to be prepared for that as well. But the folks that come to me, we have to go through the whole education of, here's what you've been taught all along. Here's your normalcy bias, cognitive dissonance, which may be 3 days, as early as 1 day to 3 days to a week. Then we get back into it, and you recognize that you want to take control, and then we talk through what do you want to do. And then we move their money out of the stock market into their own account where they can manage it with a checkbook or a debit card, and they can buy the metals and hold it at home in the safe. They can buy land, farmland, which the billionaires are buying up, but the Chinese are buying up in bulk. You have rental properties, or you have seller finance notes, or you have private loans, private equity, flipping houses, a litany of different things. Foreclosures.
Here's the point. Hey, Ross, let me interrupt you for a minute. Explain, too, that a lot of the smartest guys, I post a lot of Eric King's news because Eric is in contact with, I would say this, and I told him, I said, Eric, I don't know a billionaire you don't know. But what a lot of them are saying, too, is that people need to take personal responsibility, and just the return of your investment is now even taking precedent over return on investment. So let's take farmland. Let's take farmland, okay? I mean, people can buy farmland, can they not? They can buy land, and obviously land is based on location, but they can buy that out of their 401k, where that used to not be allowable in a 401k to have it in your own control. It had to be with a guardian. That is correct, is it not?
That's correct. You are the custodian and the trustee of your plan, and you choose where you want to invest it. So
right.
So we recommend people talk to us before they just go running off willy-nilly. Let's build a plan, and you're dead on. The return of investment is the most important thing that you do today. Just your wealth preservation is the most important thing. There may be a year of wealth preservation over growth, and that's just
now. Let me ask you this, and I want to put this because I know I maybe jumped the gun because in the third hour you're going to take questions and stuff, but the idea
that, do you believe, here's a question that I'm asking you, do you believe there's a disconnect with all the prophetic events happening and the announcement of basically a one-world religion? The Pope has pretty much made it as plain as anything, even is spelling out what the Book of Revelation had prophesied 2,000 years ago. Do you believe that if you can't, I made the statement years ago, if you can't touch it, you don't own it. But what do you think will be the leverage? Because at some point it's going to be a national ID. I think you believe 2017 is the start of the tribulation. People will argue over that. But if people don't put it into stuff they can barter with, they can even leave the country with, and, people say you can't eat gold. I want to correct you a little bit. I have made a habit of seeing what meals cost in different places in South America, Europe, the Baltic. I probably it's time to do it again. And what people don't understand, for instance, Buenos Aires, and some of the areas in Chile, and Scotty, one of my friends who lives down in Chile, said, "Man, Steve, you can get a meal here, and some of the, and in essence, an ounce of gold will pretty much buy you a minimum around the world of somewhere in the neighborhood of 120 meals. Okay, I'm calling it 1,200, 1,100, let's say 110 meals. And then what's critical for people to understand is this, and I want your answer on this because I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but the time is coming based on the one world government, based on the one world religion, based on the global ID, where we're not going to be able to buy, rent, sell, or trade. Now, that's open discussion when the day actually comes. But, Ross, I think a lot of our standard investment advice, especially in the Christian world, is absolutely ludicrous, and this is my opinion, okay, is ludicrous considering the times we live in. You want to address that? In other words, if you have any type of paper asset versus in your hot little hand or whatever, and the national ID or global ID comes in, and they basically say we're taking everything unless you take the mark of the beast. Now we can argue over when mark of the beast goes into implementation. I think it's safe to say the technology for that to take place is already pretty much at the forefront of headlines. So I guess what I'm saying, I want people to understand something. You provide an alternative to standard paper-based assets. And if they are going to crash the world's economies, they being the New World Order, which they have said, as even people lost track of the statement by the president's, I forget the name of the guy, but one of the economic advisors for, what's his name, Obama, when I call him so many other names, I can't even remember his real name. The deal is that when they took office, they said, we're going to kill the dollar. People don't get it. It was the dollar that settled debts in oil and international transactions that allowed the West to excel at everyone else's expense. And payback is going to be very difficult. So I guess it's kind of a statement and a question. The question is, do you believe, okay, given what you know, that paper outside of deeds and like pulling an Ezekiel and burying them, in a pottery jar or something, do you believe that outside of real property and tangible things that you will be able to buy and sell? Because we're told in the Bible that Christians will be locked out of the system, and we're already seeing that in the Middle East. Your comments?
Sure. I mean, I think everybody needs to have either a skill or tangible object that they can barter with. I agree with that completely. As to when the tribulation starts, I don't know. I just put in my notes that it just seems like when President Obama, if he becomes the General Secretary of the UN, which he's petitioning for, or there's rumors thereof, and Netanyahu apparently is trying to stop it, and you have a Pope that says the things that he says, I'm just looking at things saying, well, that just seems to mesh all too easily. But to answer your question is, you need to have what I would say 3 months worth of things, either in food for yourself, but also for your bills and things like that. You need to have that either in gold or cash or other kind of things that you can barter with to take care of all that. But to your point, you can use gold and silver to buy meals or to barter. You can I tell some of my customers to store up things that would be considered vices, like, and it may offend somebody, but alcohol and cigarettes and other things like that. People don't stop drinking, they don't stop smoking once, even if the economy collapses. So those are things that are borrowable. It can be tools, it can be skill sets. If you're a welder, you're a plumber, electrician, mechanics, all those people are still going to meet you. You can barter that for food or energy or wood, cordwood or anything like that. So yeah, Steve, that you're going to be strained, or your situation and your family is going to be under a lot of stress to meet your day-to-day lifestyle. I mean, the people's idea of what their lifestyle is today is going to be completely different. The fact that they're going to get to the point where I'm just glad I got a roof over my head, I can eat, I like to read by, or I like to do something. I may be able to have hot water to take a bath in or shower, and I can drink water. So, and you have neighbors and family that can do the same. So folks are going to band together in neighborhoods or create what's called I believe it's called a MAG. It's a mutual assistance group, where it may be people that are doctors and dentists and vets and carpenters and plumbers all work together to build a community that they know they can self-sustain on some property that they buy together, for instance. I work with customers that are all part of that. So at the end of the day, it's going to be you and your preparations, you and your you and your prayer life and your relationship with the Almighty. But you also have to make preparations to participate in the economy, because you can't get around that. So once to take the step one further is you talk about you can't buy or sell. Can you even work? If you don't take the mark, can you even earn a salary? Can you even participate in the labor force? Or you have to be a 1099 employee, or you have to be where a lot of people that they say they're in the shadows or the shadow economy, many of them are undocumented workers. They live like that day to day right now. They can't go and participate in credit cards, or they can't participate in certain things because they're not actual citizens. So they have to work on a cash basis or a bartering situation. And Christians in general may be the same way. And I would even venture to say even the very faithful people of the Jewish faith might have to face the same thing as well. So at the end of the day, we all have to be prepared to either want our neighbor and our relatives who may not be there. Does that answer your question? Does that get to the gist of what you're asking?
Well, kind of, but here's the thing, and please, again, this is to give the issue a full view. It used to be that you couldn't have precious metals. It used to be, and by the way, you have people too, and I don't recommend this unless people are very sophisticated, but you have people putting in like high dollar diamonds. My definition of a high dollar diamond for all the jewelers and savvy people out there is color, internally flawless, 2 to 3 carats, which based on where you can find them, it seems like when the wealthy get wind of what's going down, they run to those things. Now, I'm not saying most people listening to this show go out and buy Picassos, but the one thing that's interesting to me is for something to be in the prepper's view, and people argue with this. Well, people say, well, I'm just going to trust God and he'll provide for me. Well, I say, if you live in that world now, I believe you, and that's not a question. But the question is if they do nothing and expect God to do everything, while watching, the latest nonsensical church service with 50,000 people basically preaching La La Land and click your red slippers together and you get to go out of here before things get tough. Here's the deal. I don't believe, and this is me now talking, so ladies and gentlemen, this is me, not Ross. I don't believe Christians take the time seriously. Some of them do, but the majority, even of preppers, okay? So I'm just saying this. I think that things have to scale up. And I think, we heard of baptism in water, baptism in fire. Here's another one, baptism in reality. Because reality avoidance is something I encounter every day in whatever percentage of my emails. I get 400, sometimes 500, sometimes 200. But the point is that the people are, I liken them to a lot of them, they just don't believe this stuff is going to happen because they always fall back to the position. I've been hearing that for 20 years. My grandfather thought that, my dad thought that, and I'm not going to think that. And I said, well, your grandfather and your father were intelligent. Don't abandon genetic intelligence because you don't believe something. So what I'm saying is that I'll make this statement, we'll go on. I don't believe that Christian, and I want to define something. My definition of a Christian is someone who's bought with the blood of Jesus, who follows Jesus, who absolutely is knowing Jesus. I had this talk earlier with Pastor Langford. Doug, I think you and I had this talk too. Why would Jesus say, many will come to me in those days saying, Lord, Lord, didn't we cast out devils? Didn't we do all these things? And he says, depart from me, ye workers of iniquity. I never knew you. The point is, you can say you know Jesus, but where is the fruit in your life that Jesus knows you? Okay? It's just like the faithfulness. I had a guy just send me an email. He doesn't believe the 10 talents are literal. I guess he probably doesn't believe any of the parables are literal. The people who try and spiritualize everything also try and excuse away their lack of action. I can tell you this. I've got enough time on radio and enough emails, and I had to have my guy come over, Ross, and download 276,000 emails for 2 years. Okay?
Wow.
276,000. So the point that I think is critical is it's simply this. Ownership is 9/10 of the law. And there will come a time, and I'll turn right back to you, there'll come a time where Christians already are being persecuted. They will pass laws like the Nazis did in Germany and the other nations of Western and Eastern Europe, where anything the Christians have, in this case it was the Jews and the Christians, and everything becomes fair game. Everything. So I think the thing is that people have got to understand that the return of their investment is probably more critical than the return on investment, because quite candidly, unless you buy a product at one price and you can sell it for a higher price, just the fact that you still have it in your hands beats the guy that said, oh no, there's been a cyber attack in my entire 401k that was $692,000. I actually know a guy who basically lost $485,000 and assumes he'll have the rest of his life to make it back. By the way, he's 55, Christian. Well, if he can, God bless him. But if he can't, he's got the peace of mind that he can touch it and he owns it. And that's all I want to say on that, because again, what I talk to a lot of people, as you do, but the major disconnect is Christians don't believe that day is going to come. Doug, do you encounter that too?
Absolutely, Steve. All the time, and that's that's what we're fighting. And you know what, Steve? In addition to that, and I if you don't mind me speaking on this, or you can speak on this.
No, you speak on it. Your show.
Well,
your show.
Yeah, but you've encountered so much of this over the years. When we have shows like this, it's always categorized as fear porn, doom porn, or for example, we're talking like this to sell something, whether it be precious metals or food, and to me, I don't know how you survived a quarter of a century of talk radio. To me, this is talk like that is the most inane and irresponsible conversation. And I'm not taking, I'm not really taking to task those who say it. But those who know better and say it, I've got a problem with, because what we're seeing right now is really crunch time. When you have a Baltic Dry Index at 369, these numbers, numbers mean things, and this is horrible.
And if I could jump in here, you have two types of people, though. You have those who have gone out and created survival foods or survival services and books for the purposes of solely making money. And then at the same time, you have those who are doing what they do to try to help people while running a business. And people have been, jaded in the past by, whether it's been mega pastors promising them, money for prayers for money or whatever, the prosperity gospel.
Right.
So there is people are timid about selling things or buying things from somebody who's giving a bleak message. But I think if people were to step back, pull the emotions out of it, and look at it from a practical perspective, that would help them understand also where people are coming from.
But, right, and I think all your points are great, but I think one thing we need to bring into this is that if it was only us, four of us crying from the wilderness, so to speak, then that would be one thing. And we're trying to sell metals or 401k plans or get ratings on a radio show. That would be valid, and I think they would have the right to pull their arrows out. But when the Royal Bank of Scotland sends a newsletter to all its investors and saying you need to sell everything, buy bonds, buy gold, buy tangibles, that's another. That tells you then the UBS says start buy gold, sell everything else and buy gold. When these major banking institution and investment houses say sell what you got and move into something different, you probably should listen because they know something. And I'm not a big fan of George Soros, but George Soros says publicly stated several times in the last 2 weeks, this is worse than 2008. You have people in the Fed saying, now we're talking about negative interest rates, and that'll kind of segue us into the next section a little bit. But negative interest rates are already in Germany and France are across the EU a lot, which that means then, so you as the unsecured debtor to the bank or creditor to the bank, you put in $1,000 and they say, well, your rate is negative 1%. Well, that means you just lost $10. Because if you put in $1,000, 10% is $100, but 1% is $10. Your negative interest, your rate for your savings. So at the end of that 1 year, you won't have that $1,000 or $1,100, which you're used to. You'll have $990. So if you do that on an institutional level, so that means what they're trying to do is so you don't keep money in a bank, you don't keep it in cash where it's liquid, where it's sort of still a liability because you're going to want your money. You may want cash. And that leads us to the whole discussion of the war on cash. And I think the whole negative interest rate is going to drive where people say, well, I'm not going to leave my money in the bank and then I'm getting maybe 10 basis points or maybe 20 or maybe even 60 if I'm on a jumbo CD for 5 years. I might even get 0.75 or maybe 75 basis points. But if they start saying, well, if you commit your money to a 1-year CD, we'll only charge you a negative 1% interest rate. But if you commit to 5, we'll give you 10 positive basis points. So they want to make sure people don't keep their money in the bank where they can actually transact it. They don't want you to write checks. They'd rather you use debit cards or everything digitalized so that they can say suddenly, oh, wait, you now have $10,000. We're just going to have to move that one to the left one. You now have $1,000 overnight. So that's why the war on cash is there, because if you have $10,000 of cash stuffed in your mattress or in your safe next to your 3 monster boxes of silver coins and in a sleeve of gold 1-ounce American Eagles, and you have $10,000 in cash, that's a direct liability on the bank. If you bring in $1 or you have these cash, they have to honor it. That's a liability. If you don't have that cash, then they control everything. You control everything. The same with the silver and the gold. If you can turn that into whatever the new world order exchange device may be, whatever the currency is, whether it's a world dollar, or it's a SDR, or whether it's some iteration in between, you have that will be directly convertible to that, unless they outlaw it, which they did in the 30s. But you'd be amazed at the level of compliance that was in the 30s. I still have gold, dime-sized 1/10 ounce type of gold coins I got from my grandma, that she put a brown purse that we passed down generation to generation, had these gold coins in it. We should have turned them in, but now it doesn't matter because it's all is forgiven. But at the end of the day, you having cash and liquid assets, but as I mentioned, that 3-pronged stool is liquidity. You having that ability to buy and sell outside of the digitized world could be the yay or nay of your death, or the yay or nay of your sickness or illness or starvation or the harm to your children and your spouses. So you're going to see that as the war on cash heats up, and they're going to try to push inflation. I mean, a lot of people are saying that deflation is on the horizon. Great articles on Zero Hedge on that as well. But at the end of the day, food prices are only going to go up. So you need to have food, and whether it's cans from Costco or Sam's or your local grocery store, or it's Storable Foods, or it's growing your own garden, which I would recommend everybody do that. Or it's even easier if you do hydroponics to grow your leafy vegetables, which will sustain you, whether it's collard greens or spinach or lettuce or any of those kind of things will sustain you. Having that ability, either the willingness or the ability to do it, is going to make you different from somebody else that's just still in that cognitive, that's still in that normalcy bias that everything's fine. I'm just going to go get my check and I'm just going to go to the store when they find out that that store doesn't have it anymore or your check didn't arrive. So I can't, and I'd say this to my kids, I can't stress hard enough that people need to get back to the basics of their lifestyle. Forgo the new DVD player or the latest streaming device or latest phone. Live with what you got and focus on things that you can use in your life going forward, albeit being food, water, tools, skills. And the biggest thing that everybody needs besides their faith and and exercising their faith through prayer life and service to others, it's just like a muscle. Your faith is like a muscle, just like anything else in your body. Your faith needs to be exercised, but you need to be able to be mentally strong to work through what's coming. You can be and Steve, I'm going to get back to the panic word for a second. You can be the most, what was that doomsday prepper show that was on TV that just made people look like the fools and silliness and made preppers look like the laughing stock many times. And they always shot holes in their preparations and things.
Yeah, but they never went to the Goldman. Hey, Ross, they never went to the Goldman Sachs bunker or any of the billionaire bunkers, did they? All they did was vilify a mindset by basically showing people who had very little trying to do the best they can. Okay, I actually know I think two of those people that were featured in that show. But the point is that every day on the London Daily Mail or the Telegraph or some of the world things, they're talking about the billionaires heading to their bunkers. Look, I live in Bozeman, Montana, and up the road from me, 30 miles up Big Sky, you got the wealthiest people in the world living up there, and they've got, bunkers in their basements, and, Bozeman's kind of a bailout point. But I think how's the statement go? Failing to prepare is preparing to fail. Let me read this, and I'll turn it right back over to you. This is by Randy Conway. And Randy and I know Randy, we had the most amazing run-in in a restaurant that he'd never gone to, and I was over Tom Horn, but here's the deal. God bless you, Randy. It says this: I weep for the unprepared. I weep for those who are caught unaware when men will die and it's too late for prayer. How sad that many will not believe, and the cost of denial they will receive. When judgment falls, people will be frantic. The children will cry and the mothers will be in a panic. The fathers will watch their loved ones suffer because they're too proud to establish a buffer. The buffer is not that you can escape from the storm, but to do what you can to keep your family fed and keep them warm. A prudent man foresees evil and takes action to save himself. How sad to be a father who refused to even put some food on the shelf. The tears will flow long with rivers of blood, both mingling in the streets, a cruel and bitter flood. Money will be changed, and who knows what it will be worth. Now is the time to hear, not when trouble has been birthed. I weep for the women and I weep for the children. I pray for protection from Satan's employed villains. But alas, I can but pray. I cannot act for you. You must decide that the word of God is true. Your decision will affect today, tomorrow, and forever. The Heavenly Father weeps, for he has invited whomsoever. Those who refuse to believe the truth as the watchmen cry are accursed then with a delusion that they should believe the lies. I weep for those who will be caught in the terrible panic. How can you describe what is coming except to say it'll be satanic? Grievous times that God has warned us about. Multitudes scoff the warnings, living in a world of spiritual drought. Salvation waits for those who will be saved. Those who reject Jesus are destined to be enslaved. The enemy of our souls has planned for you a future that is depraved. In the palm of the Father's hand, the believer's name has been engraved. Now, I one of these things really jumped out for me. I deal with people day in and day out that want to know if it's okay for them to protect their men who are asking that. And I go, oh, Lord, help me to choose my word carefully in my email. Because at the end of the day, the critic won't be there to protect your wife, men.
At the end of the day, the critic won't be there to provide you food, men. At the end of the day, the doors on the knock or the crowd calling you out, who is going to be there to stand with you? You know, this is a pretty powerful word, you know, Doug. This is a really powerful word. You know, it's interesting. The buffer is not that you can escape from the storm, but to do what you can to keep your family fed and keep them warm. A prudent man perceives evil and takes action to save himself. How sad to be a father who refused to even put some food on his shelf. This is basic to breathing. This is basic to living. This is basic to existence. This is the pioneer spirit, yet people simply won't do it. So, you know, Ross, you're a nice guy, and I love that about you. I have to be pragmatic because I understand that, and I'm not saying you're not, but I have to be pragmatic because the idea that the Christian church, now this is a time for 3 minutes of a roll, the Christian church sits back while Christian women are bought, sold, raped, beheaded, stoned, hung. The Christian church, to a large degree, the majority of that which calls itself, they're not doing anything at all, except take that back, with the exception of intercessors, care about anything because it's over there. But it's our children that are on the chopping block. No alliteration on that. It's our wives. You know, the thing that I'm trying to get people to say is, Bravo Sierra, it's bovine laundry. That one you're probably going to have to think what I mean by that. The idea is this, okay? This is a serious bunch of events happening, and this cannot be handled with, you know, cowhide gloves, and this isn't pretty. It's going to get real dangerous. Almost got me there, Doug, you know, with the rhyming with pretty. The idea is people have got it. People have got to understand. We're seeing it in other lands. Germany, you're talking about the home of BMW, Mercedes, Zeiss Optics, Leica Optics, and some of the best machines ever built, some of the highest technology, and they've lost their country because they've been invaded, and now the German lawmakers want to tax the last that the German people have to feed the raping, pillaging horde. I don't know if you guys saw this, but they busted a Syrian. They busted because he was performing a sexual awakening. Okay, you can go in the London Daily Mail and see the story of where the lovely, peace-loving invasionists, they're not immigrants, they're invasionists, or the army of the invasion, are saying your women are only there to be raped. You've got to understand that is a philosophy that allows men to rape their wives, to kill their wives, and to have sex with children, the child brides.
In sex slaves, where they can sell them into rape houses, right?
Yeah, and so can I say something? You know, I'm telling you this. I have said, Lord, if you want me to tone it down, then tone it down. But God, the gloves have to come off because I'm dealing right now. We're on the air, Doug, and people don't understand. I can read emails and still talk and, you know, be somewhat coherent. They're dealing with this as if it will never come to them. And what Ross Powell has just been telling you is that the Baltic Dry Index means there's nothing going to be on your shelves, ladies and gentlemen. I don't care if it's whatever you think, it's not going to be there. So acquire it now, because look, we've talked and I've pled, I've begged, and when I wept on the air, look at him, he's just a crybaby. Take that to Jeremiah. I'm no Jeremiah, but I'll tell you this. I've said when the tears begin to flow, they won't stop. And as Randy Conway just said, and the rivers of blood, both mingling in the streets, will be a cool and bitter flood. You know, we see blood flowing. We see, and look, here's what's amazing to me. Even the homosexuals aren't throwing up an outcry about gay people being thrown off buildings. For the record, that's horrific. It's disgusting. Look, here's the deal. We have embraced a culture of death. We worship death. It's in our movies. It's in our rock and roll. It's in the video games. You don't think video games aren't a culture of death?
And yet, when Jesus comes and said, I have come that you might have life and have it more abundantly, you know what we say? Move over, Jesus. I'm too busy with my video game. Now, I mean no disrespect to the Son of God with that statement. But everything, and where's the Christians' outrage when the head of a billion believing members, billion whatever, Doug, you probably know, Catholic Church, basically says everybody goes to heaven. Yeah, Jesus said, no man comes unto the Father except by me. You see, here's what I'm saying, and then I'm going to turn it over, and maybe I better just turn it over. People don't get it. I'll give you a good example. People, will quote about the four horsemen of the apocalypse, okay? So Sheila Zelinsky writes the Green Gospel. If you don't understand that the pale horse, behold a pale horse, that, what was the name of the guy that wrote that book? I can't think of his name right now.
Bill Cooper.
The pale horse, yeah. Cooper. The bottom line is that we're now seeing Agenda 21 unfolding in Oregon. We saw it wanting to take hold of Nevada. Here's the deal. It's not enough to get your stuff. They want the strife to take your life, okay? I'm not trying to be Randy Conway. He is one of a kind. But when Sheila wrote the Green Gospel, the New World Religion, she nailed it, okay? And I'm going to read some because I can't say any better than this. There exists a group of clandestine, self-proclaimed ruling oligarchs who are in fact soulless pagans, she was nice there, with designs on reshaping the world into a state of complete global governance where everyone embraces the goddess Gaia as God. Christians are at war with this group and don't even know it. Their endgame is to destroy constitutional liberties, the free market economy through deindustrialization, and ultimately population reduction. Even more frightening is their astonishing plan to reinstate a form of paganism dating back to Nimrod. These people want to control every aspect of your life and to exert dominance over every single daily activity. Now, ladies and gentlemen, that's a mouthful, and I'm just going to use the last minute before we turn it over and Ross can take questions. Doug, I have purposed in my heart, and Ross, if you haven't said this, I'm going to, anytime I go on talk radio, I'm going to speak as if it's my last time to speak. The deal is that the pale horse of the apocalypse, I mean, it's like dancing green horses from hell, running through the streets, galloping through the streets, and everybody goes, my pastor's talking about the figurative or the symbolism of the four horsemen of the apocalypse. I said, go and look at Agenda 21. Dave Hodges writes about it. Sheila nails it. And yet so many people will not identify. This is the fourth horse of the apocalypse, okay? And so, somebody said, now chill. I hear you, now chill. I'd say you, pal, Sage Raider, you better warm up because you better grow up and warm up.
Steve.
The idea is this, Doug. There is no passion in the church for righteousness. There is no passion in the name for Jesus. The radio wars, all the wars going on in Christendom, I'm not kidding you. Watch who talks about Jesus versus quoting Scripture, and they understand the spirit behind the living God.
I just want to give a quick update. At the top of the show, I mentioned about the Chinese actually releasing their GDP for the last quarter and the full year. And the numbers just broke during the break. So that's a bad pun, but the numbers just broke. So they came up at 6.8% in Q4 and 6.9% in the full year. You can believe it, whether you want to believe it or not. The Asian markets are pretty much mixed. It's nothing's really going on. The pre-market or the future market for the Dow is up 109, S&P is up 12, and the Nasdaq futures are up 19. So that says that we may get a bounce tomorrow. Whether we can sustain it or not, I don't know. So those of you who have lost your shorts over the last 14, 15 days, you might get a little bounce, but I wouldn't hold my cup thinking that's just going to overflow. So just wanted to give that quick update because I knew I talked about at the beginning of the show. And I think it's important to see what happens tomorrow because it's going to set the tone for the rest of the week and probably the month. So I just wanted to bring that in. So go ahead and shoot your questions.
All right. We're going to go with, we've picked up a lot of new listeners over the last several months and weeks. I'm going to toss a softball question to you, okay? And people might roll their eyes at this question. But in the landscape of banks, credit unions and such, are credit unions safer to put your money in than banks? For example, and this from Tom, are credit unions safer than banks, I guess, for your money?
Well, I guess it depends on the management and the size of the credit union and what their history is.
Yeah.
Now, everybody has to understand how money flows from within the government, the Fed. The Fed controls the money. The Congress makes the spending, but the Fed, which is it's its own private organization. It's not a government entity. It's a private bank run by leaders of all the other major banks. So if you look at who the head of the Dallas Fed is, or the New York Fed, or the Frisco Fed, or the Chicago Fed, or all these major cities, they're all inside the banking world and investment bankers. So they're the who's who of the banking world. So the Fed has its own balance sheet in the trillions and trillions of dollars. It's swollen to just an unbelievable number, in the plus $5 trillion or something like that. Now, they print the money. So they push the money, whether they call it QE1, QE2, QE3, QE. It's all digitized money. They just push out to the banks. Money rolls from the Fed to the market makers, which are normally the big banks like Wells Fargo and JP Morgan Chase and Goldman Sachs, and all these guys are market makers. The money rolls to them, and then it rolls down to the regional banks and then to the smaller banks. And the credit unions are somewhere in the middle. So if the money collapses, now there's a couple of caveats here, and I'm going to talk to those in a minute. But if the money supply collapses, or the Fed collapses, or there's some major issue that money is no longer is worthless, then it's going to run through the entire system. Nobody is safe. All bets are off. That's when we always talk about hard assets. How can you eat? How can you drink? How can you grow your own crops? How you can protect yourself, cover your head, so you're not sleeping in your face in the mud, to quote Bubba on Forrest Gump. So you have to protect yourself. All the money starts in one place. There's a headwaters called the Fed. It all rolls downhill. So whether you're in Podunk, Idaho, or you're in the top of the penthouse in New York City, the money comes from the same source. How you derive it and how you get it is probably two different things. So can a credit union be more? It depends what they're investing, making their loans to. And that gets me to it's all what the bank loans their money to. If you're in a bank that's got a huge exposure to oil and the energy sector right now, your bank is hurt. I can guarantee, whether they tell you or not, it is. Citibank fudged on how big when they did their earnings discussion last week. They fudged on the numbers how big their energy book is. I know for a fact Wells Fargo's is big. Chase is medium. There's a lot of regional banks in South Texas and North Dakota that have huge exposures. So it all depends on what your bank is loaning to, is depending how safe they are. Now again, a cataclysmic or what I use pandemonium sets in, all bets are off for everybody. So that's where you prepare for the worst and hope for the best at that point.
All right.
I hope that helps.
It does. Actually, it answers some concerns I had, or some issues I had. Now, here's a question from one of probably 100,000 Karens in San Antonio. And this is kind of a time-sensitive question. And before I ask this question, I'll just bounce it back to Karen, the person who's asking the question. Are you adopting? All right. Here's her question. How much can I withdraw before setting up a red flag? I just received a fairly small inheritance, and I don't know what to do with the check. I pick it up tomorrow. And again, Karen, if you're adopting, hey, I'm an orphan. No, Ross, you got to keep your sense of humor, right?
But I guess I got to put that question in perspective. She's received an inheritance, right? Is that what she said?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, so inheritance, unless the check is part of an estate greater than, I don't know, $3 million or something now, she has no worries on taxes. So if she received a check probably from the trustee of the estate, then that money is non-taxable. She can put it anywhere she wants. So if it's $1,000, it's $10,000, $100,000, $500,000, it doesn't matter. If it's $3 million too, then she's got issues. She's going to pay tax. So unless you can get with an estate planner that can help her put the money in places which is beyond my scope, but I can turn around to some people that can. Now, if she's talking about withdrawing the money in cash, that's a whole other discussion. And I would tell her to take all the money at once that she wants. If she is adopting somebody, it's not a child that she needs the cash, then take the money out at once. Don't ever go 1,000 here and 5,000 there and five. So because you need 10, you take 25. That's structuring. And Denny Hazard got busted for that. And anybody can get busted for that because it's just everybody knows it's your money. But as part of the anti-money laundering schematic now, that if you start to structure, you're going to get in trouble. So if you want $10,000 in cash, you need to call your bank up in advance and say, I need $10,000 in cash. You can choose to tell them what it's for, or you can choose not to. I'm not going to advise anybody to lie what they're doing. You just tell them what you need it for. They'll organize it. They'll get it sent to the bank. I mean, I have a customer that took $50,000 out and is storing it away in a safe. So he told him what he wanted it for, and he's sticking it in there. Whether he still has it or not, I don't know. But at the end of the day, don't ever and ever, and I'm not talking as a banker or as a government official, I'm just telling you to protect yourself, never try to structure your deals to take money out less out of your. If you have a big number in mind, take it all at once. Don't try to just piecemeal it because it's only going to get you in trouble.
Yeah, Kent Hovind comes to mind.
They see and know everything. I'm sorry?
No, Kent Hovind comes to mind, and others. Dennis Hastert comes to mind. Kent Hovind, of course, is different. Structuring was not his intent, ostensibly, but anyway.
Yeah, same difference.
Yeah.
I don't think Hastert's was either. I think he was just trying to get on the DL to pay off whatever sordid issue that he had in the past.
Yeah.
But whether it was intentional, it doesn't. Your intent doesn't matter. The fact is that you did it. You're still busted. You're still in trouble. So please don't do it.
Wow.
All right, Mr. Powell, we got a question here from a Myrna C out of Yuma, Arizona. What will happen to all life insurance policies? Will they collapse and be worthless? I have not heard anyone address this. Therefore, I would greatly appreciate it if you could. God bless. Great work and great information.
Well, it all depends on your. Now, life insurance. You have two types of life insurance. You have term life insurance, which is for a period of time, whether it's 5, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, and you pay different premiums for that, and based on your age and all of that. I used to work in the insurance business, but I wasn't a life guy, but I understand. I had to take enough tests to understand it. So you have your term insurance, which you're betting that you are going to die. Okay, so you're betting against yourself. Sort of, you're shorting your life. Put it that way. So it's a very cheap way to do it. If you think you look at your family and everybody kicks the bucket by 70 and you're 55, then I wouldn't go beyond 15-year term or maybe 20. Think if you have longevity in your family, your grandmother, your grandfather, and everybody in your family lives to 100, then term insurance is probably not good for you because once you get past a certain threshold of 65 or so, it's going to be so expensive to get that insurance, it's going to be unaffordable. Now, the other side of it is what some people use the old term of whole life or universal life. There's these things that a portion of your premium goes towards the insurance, sort of on a term basis, and a portion goes where they invest it and you build up a cash value. So if she's talking about term insurance, if you're still alive and the insurance companies go belly up, it doesn't matter because you're still alive. Now, if you have on the whole side where you have a whole bunch of money you have a cash value of, let's say, $500,000 and the insurance company is sitting there, I would be a little bit worried. And I do have customers that are pulling money out from their annuities and their life insurance or other life insurance products and rolling it over into one of our products and then using that to put it in tangible assets. They have surrender charges, which can be sizable, some as low as a couple thousand, maybe 500, others to the tune of 10,000. It all depends on how much they have and when they put it in there. So if you're at the ninth year of a 10-year annuity or something like that, then you're probably going to have a low surrender charge. But if you're at year 2 on a 10-year, you're going to pay a stiff penalty. So to answer your question, it depends. It depends on your insurance. And so but if it's a complete collapse and that insurance company can't pay because all of their assets have gone the way of the dodo, then you can't get blood out of a turnip. So just keep that in mind. I mean, many of these companies have been around for 200-300 years. I mean, literally from Europe and things like that. That they've survived pretty much everything. If you're with them, I would feel pretty safe. If you're one of the more newer companies, then I would be a little bit more concerned. But again, if you're at term, I wouldn't worry about it. If you're in whole life or universal life and you have a big cash value on your policy, then I would consider thinking about moving some of it out and moving it into hard assets if you can.
Wonder if you've got a piece of the rock, aren't you? All right.
Right.
Here's a question, and it's more of a question about a situation. The bank has foreclosed on your house. your bank account of $1,000 has been confiscated, credit cards don't work, you have to be out of your house in one day, your wife has the flu, your kids are too young to walk, it's too cold, all the food you stockpiled in the basement is too much to carry because they have confiscated your car. You have no friends and it's 30 below. What now? That's from David, and he says, blessings on your show tonight.
Okay. Could the situation be any worse? I mean, I first called my pastor and but if they didn't confiscate your wheelbarrow, you can hump that stuff down the street that way, cover it with a blanket. You have bicycles, things like that. I mean, that's just a ridiculous question. No offense to whoever wrote it. I'm just saying that situation is, if it's his, I'll pray for him. What was his name?
There is no name left.
Yeah, that's all right.
Okay, all right. Well,
I suspect that's a hypothetical question.
I'm sorry, David is the actual person who asked.
Well, right, man. To David, I don't. If you're listening, you can call me and we can talk through some other ideas. I don't know what to do without hearing all the facts. I mean, I would hope that you would have an attorney to stop some of that. They can't make you homeless necessarily. You have to have some ways of even eating, and your homestead has a certain rights, and you have ability to not to make you homeless with no car, no credit, no nothing. They can't do that.
Right.
So I would reach out to, if you can't afford an attorney, find somebody that would do it pro bono for your case. There's all kinds of public defenders that may take your case, who may do some side work. So I would definitely reach out. Number one, reach out to an attorney. Number two, reach out if you have a faith organization. Reach out to them. Check into some local homeless shelters for families. There's plenty of those these days. All of those things will let you catch your breath and get back on your feet, so that you're not living on the street and, number one, getting sick or victimized by people on the street, because that happens a lot these days. So I would. The short answer is get a lawyer and go to a shelter and regroup.
And get some friends and pray. And yeah, indeed.
Right. Exactly.
All right. This comes from a listener who it appears that may have talked to you in the past, but when you take, for example, if I'll just, because this person asked for anonymity, if I would come to you, Ross, and say, look, I'd like to buy, or I'd like to funnel or take possession of precious metals. I don't know. Let's say I've got $100,000 that I want to invest in, or 50 or whatever it might be, or whatever, right. Whatever money, it doesn't matter. But I want to, let's see here. I'm trying to figure out how to, let's see. Okay, I'm going to purchase and maintain physical possession of precious metals. We know that's legal, but will this move be on the record for the government to know that you've got precious metals in your physical possession? I'm not exactly. Do you share records with the government, I guess, is what he's asking, or does the government know about
that's
this?
That's more of a question for Steve, because I don't actually sell the metals. That I would send them to Steve or a litany of other metals dealers, maybe locally. But there's
yeah. I can answer that, obviously. I deal with that every day. Thank you, Ross. The deal is that all transactions are accounted for. And I tell people, if that is a concern, then ship it to the post office box, get a post office box. And, the point is that there's no way to cover it up, because in order to ship precious metals, the precious metal dealer, in this case me, I have to have cleared funds, a check or a bank wire, and once those funds, we ship them. The safest way is to avoid shipping them to your home, shipping into a P.O. box, and then all metals are shipped either registered mail, FedEx, overnight on gold, this is how my company does it, and 3-day on silver upon cleared funds. Cleared funds means not when it clears your bank, but when the receiving bank clears it. So the only way to answer that question is you either pick it up, you wire ahead of time and come, and some people do this. They prefer to just come to Montana. I'm not saying that's the best way, or they just get a P.O. box at the post office, or even one of those, whatever they call postal box rental places. That is the safest way. It does two things. Number one, I'll tell you this, most people don't get it, but the postal situation, we were told this by a postal inspector, on the West Coast and in Chicago and some of the other major cities has become very difficult. The U.S. Post Office does a great job in monitoring registered mail. Registered means obviously it's checked in. If it goes from me, let's say to Ross Powell, in Texas. It'll go from me to Denver, from Denver to Dallas, from Dallas to Austin. Every point it goes is checked in. So the best way is basically have it shipped to a P.O. box. That way you have nobody who's an agent delivering it. Nobody knows. And obviously, what some people do, and this is all perfectly legal, they get a P.O. box in another town, have it delivered. The post office has to hold it because it's registered. You have to sign for precious metals. Now, one of my clients, FedEx, got in a lot of trouble because some, dumb driver left a rather sizable amount of metals on his front porch, and you can't do that. So by the grace of God, he's a believer nothing was stolen. So it's becoming problematic, Doug. It's becoming problematic. Once you have an event that Ross is talking about, cyber attack, once you have anything that shuts down commerce, you will not be able to get delivery of any metals. That's it in a nutshell.
Or even if you have them sitting in a repository or depository, you can't get them. Now, the other thing, Steve, it is some types of metals and the size of the purchases are reportable, like silver bars over 100 ounces or 1,000 ounces have to be reported separately. But American Eagles, Canadian maple leaves, different coinages don't have to be reported because they don't have to. But I can tell you from a banking perspective, if you push out wires of $10,000 or greater, any type of transaction over $10,000 is going to get put into the database. So that doesn't mean
it has to, Ross. Yeah. It has to, because the deal is, look, it's not the amount, it's the fact that it's traceable. People say, should I go withdraw, X number of dollars and pay for it in cash? No, it's not, because that puts an extra step in there that puts them at risk. Listen, there's still some semblance of free trade, okay? Free trade, I'll define that, is still being able to send a check or send a wire. What they're looking for is structuring, which you explained very well, and they're looking for people that pay cash, okay? And I got to tell you, very few people outside of buying a couple $100 pay cash for metals anymore, because it's easier just to send a check or a wire. Now, will they change that? Yes. And at some day, it's going to be trackable. Silver Eagles, Canadian maple silver, gold coins, whether they're U.S. gold Eagles or Canadian maple leafs, there's no issues with those, okay? And there's no issues whatsoever. It's when people hear that if it's over 10,000, I think that's what you're saying, every bank has an internal reporting thing, and it's internal. The only time something goes external is on a suspicious activity transaction report
right?
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, SAR. So the point is that it's still possible to buy it, but here's the point. The Chinese and the Russians and everybody's buying a lot of gold. There's still coins at stores like mine. There are a bunch of stores like mine, but the point is delivers everything. And when the delivery is slowed, the availability of products. So he said, well, I can walk down to my store and buy 20 ounces of silver. What do you mean there's no silver? I'm not being a smart aleck. I get this. I say, try and go down to that same store and buy 1,000 ounces of silver. Well, the guy only stocks 20 to 400 ounces. So it becomes problematic, okay? So there's no problem taking it, getting it, writing a check, writing a wire. The time will come as stress becomes more and more increasing that the fuel prices will rise because, look, even if gas goes down, the FedEx, UPS, everybody's got to raise their prices. So the thing is that whatever they call it, a transaction tax, a delivery tax, whatever, that's how they're going to stay in business. So I encourage people to move while they can, because that's not a scare tactic. It's not I'm selling fear to sell silver and gold. I got news for you. Tell that to the Russians and Chinese. They'll just shake their head and basically in their own language say, stupid American. That's the only people that talk like that.
Steve, let me ask you. I just want to slip in a real quick question, and then I'm going to back out here. So, Steve, is gold or silver, either one, is it becoming harder to get, whether it be silver, gold eagles, or generic?
Well, yeah, because if you look at Steve, Rocco that we had on your show, Doug, he posts the amount of gold and silver coins being sold by the mint, and there are more being sold in 1 week than an entire month, and there are no 2016 Silver Eagles yet. But see, this is what people don't understand. the availability of the blanks that they stamp either a Canadian maple leaf image on or a U.S. silver eagle image on. Obviously, the size is different, but they get blanks, and then they put them in their presses, and voila, you've either got a Canadian maple leaf or a U.S. silver eagle. Tougher to get the raw material because as the manipulators have driven down the price of gold and silver, mines are closing, and the availability of a raw product to get refined is becoming more difficult. And at some point, you can't have something that's 1,000 times oversold, meaning there's 1,000 more claims against an ounce than there are ounces to fulfill the order. That has to kick in sometime. So what the power brokers are doing is they're trying to take all hope away from the American people to have something for retirement, something that they can rely on. And so that's why the mainstream press badmouths gold, badmouths the precious metals, and they're doing everything they can to keep people in the system because Ross just told you, they can take your money if they have any type of event that turns against their earnings and their profitability and their reserve requirements.
I can tell you for a fact, if JP Morgan Chase or any of the major banks or even any of the major banks tell you that don't buy gold or silver, I can tell you that they're doing it themselves. There's been numerous cases where they told their customers, don't buy it, it's a bad move, and then in the back end they're buying millions of ounces of themselves. So just whenever you hear advice from they're market makers, I'd probably do the opposite thing. Now I just want to answer the second part of her question. Don't worry about the 10,000 threshold and worry about the availability. If you're an honest person, you're not laundering money, you're not running guns, you're not selling bomb parts to terrorists, you're not yelling Allah Akbar in Walmart, then you have nothing to worry about. If they come and check you, it's a simple questionnaire. They ask you what you're doing with it. Can you see it? Boom, there it is. It's over and done. If you're worried about confiscation, I can tell you right now it would take 2 Marine divisions, maybe 1 Marine division, or Expeditionary Division to back up deuce and a halves to every depository in the country, offload all the gold, and take it into Fort Knox, where there's probably plenty of space. So they're not going to have the manpower nor the will to come kicking in your door to find your 20 ounces of gold that's already in the wind. So I wouldn't worry about, people ask me that question all the time, would it be worried about getting confiscated? No. I would be worried about your neighbor taking it from you. I'd worry about your some roving band of weirdos taking it from, but from the government going and kicking your door, taking it, I'm not worried about that. So I wouldn't lose any sleep over any transactions being traced unless you're doing something nefarious and something that's treasonous. I wouldn't worry about it.
All right. Next up, we got kind of I don't know if this is more of a statement from Bill. He says, the Lord is allowing our greed and bitterly bad behavior, abortion as an example, take us to our reward. Starting with a mighty fall from grace in the economic affairs, we will soon be following Canada in their dollars fall from grace with all the trimmings, derivative meltdowns, bank failures, and, of course, the entire credit market seize up to dwarf the 2008 fiasco. Hunger and death stalk the nation. That from Bill.
Yeah, that's a statement. Wow.
Maryland.
That's more of a statement. Right.
Yeah. All right.
This is a question for me.
I disagree with the statement, but go ahead.
This is a question for me, and I've seen economists in the mainstream go both sides on this, that they will see all-time highs in the Dow in 2016 and versus all-time lows. What's your opinion on that, Ross?
Oh, I think we're going to see probably a 20 to 30% correction. You want to call it correction? I think we're heading into a bear market big time. We'll see. And again, recognize that the whole thing is manipulated and it's used by the government to build perception, as we talked about earlier in the show, perception and expectations, just like the Chinese are doing and the Russians doing. All these different governments inject large sums of cash through their market makers. And so you may see it go down. But when you start seeing on CNBC, Yahoo Finance, Fox News, NBC News, they're all talking either recession or they're talking about a market correction of 20 to 30%. I would probably stand to start listening to those voices because we've been talking about that for over 6 to 9 months, I think, Doug, on shows all the way back to May. I think we talked about getting ready for a really terrible 2016. And so if the mainstream media is talking to whose talking points are pretty much laid out for them, and some independent writers that show up on some of these blogs of these mainstream stations are saying all these things, then I would suggest that you believe them. So I may be wrong. I mean, if I knew the stock market it could predict it every day, I would be in a different business altogether. But I would say from all my research and back in the Baltic Dry Index, all of the things that are going on in the world, again, this tapestry we talked about from the beginning of the show, I would say 20 to 30% down year. You may go down 20% and back up, a couple back down again. So it's almost like a stair step downward. I think you'll see by the end of the year you'll be in the, I don't know, the 12, 13, 14 range probably, I'm guessing, because we're in the high 15s today. You may bump up over 16 tomorrow, but I bet you we'll be, by the end of next year, we'll probably be closer to 13 or 12. I don't think it's going to be as bad as 2000. I mean, I think the whole economic situation is going to be worse. I know the stock market is going to tank as bad as it did in 2008. But again, I don't have a crystal ball on that. So. All
right. And if I can ask this to Steve, just to clarify, you know, Steve, you and I spoke about this, and there are a couple of emailers have asked this question just for clarification. Steve, I remember, I think it was over the weekend or perhaps even this morning, I'm not even sure, but or last week, I don't know. You and I spoke about the oil prices. And this really is a proxy economic war between the West and Russia, isn't it? Can you expand on that, Steve, just a tad, just a clarification?
Well, sure. I mean, obviously, the Russian ruble has fallen to its lowest level in years, and Vladimir Putin understands the way that the United States always got cooperation was pretty much to keep the price of oil, you know, obviously in collusion with the Saudis or Venezuela or Nigeria or wherever there was oil in the world, you know, quite candidly, outside of what Russia and China controlled, we controlled, okay? Or we gave those countries protection and put in puppet dictators or whatever. But right now, I mean, it costs money to run countries. So President Putin, I believe, is going to be proven to be incredibly brilliant, because I think he is that anyway. But when it comes to finances, he is on record as saying the West is trying to starve Russia out, and he won't put up with it. And he said, basically, he intimated that Russia is ready to go to war at a certain point over that. Well, when we continue to, you know, do everything we can to provoke war, I want everybody to understand, you want to do a basic study in Russian war policy, they believe in first strike. And we've already seen, you know, what a real leader is in President Putin versus what a non-leader is and what we got. So the idea is that I'll share this to everybody. When they start ratcheting up, they're not going to put up with it, because to them, it's a strategic attack economically. And quite candidly, economic attacks can be as devastating as, and more devastating than bombs, bullets, rockets, etc. The only thing that changes the equation are nukes. So that's, Doug, what's going on. It is a design of the power brokers to try and control Russia and bring Russia to its knees.
Understood.
People don't get it.
But, and on the other side of that is that the Russians and the Chinese working to destroy the petrodollar and the homogeny of the American way of life and the American petrodollar and the American ruling with the strength of the dollar. So they're trying to avoid the dollar, telling them not to use dollars anymore. China's using the yuan and the ruble, and they're trading back and forth. In their spheres of influence, the dollar's not being used any longer. So they're fighting back through their own war of attrition through us. And so it's a constant duel. Some days we win, some days they win. So it's you're right, you're dead on. It's just not a shooting war yet. Okay. But I would hold on to my head that it might be. Sorry about that, Doug.
No, that's great. Now, Ross, I'm going to direct this question to you, because this, to me, is the epitome of someone with blinders. Okay, and this is a 6-part question. I'm just going to boil it down into really a couple of this from a listener who has a mental disconnect. He lives in Santa Clarita, California. All right, and this to me is the epitome of the population. I mean, this reflects the majority of the uninformed population, or the people who have bought into the lie. And if that hurts the emailer, well, so be it. He writes this. Please tell me where the disconnect is in Santa Clarita, California, where I reside. Hey, you know what? Everything is rosy. No, I'm paraphrasing, of course. The city has over a dozen car dealerships, exclusive Mercedes, BMW. Every day of the week, I see trucks of new cars being delivered to these dealers. which means that they are selling cars like crazy. California issues license plate numerical sequence, so you can tell the newness of the car by its license plate number. I'd estimate that at least 80% of all the cars on the road here are new, within 3 years or old or younger. New housing construction going up all over the place. There are at least 6 new tracks going up, and you know what? They got them all right there. And every time I drive by, no shortage of cars in the parking lot. It indicates people they're buying. And you know what? I look around. I don't have to step over homeless people because I don't see any. People aren't holding back money. They're, by not eating out. They're eating out. They're eating places that are eating places that are generally doing well. Pizza delivery cars. They're zipping around left and right, man. That's expensive food. I just don't see. And here's the kicker. I just don't see with my own little eyes. I can't spy with my little eyes that the economy is just as bad as you're alleging, Ross and Steve. Shame on you. So, Ross, what do you say to that?
Sure. Okay. I'd like that gentleman to take his Mercedes into Detroit, Cleveland, parts of Pennsylvania, parts of Texas, parts of Arizona, etc. So he's living in a bubble. I hate to tell him he's living in the OC, and he is deluded himself, because if he got out of his bubble and drove around a little bit, he would be dead. He would have a completely different view of it. So I'd love for the gentleman to take a ride around the country and talk to folks who are out of work, get out of his bubble, and I'm great that he's living the life. More power to you. I just think that's a one in a million chance that's not here. I mean, in San Antonio, we're growing as well. So, but there's a lot of parts of the country that are not.
Right.
And just because you're growing today, just because there's lots of cars in the mall, and just because you're selling cars, doesn't mean that that's prudent to do, or that it's going to continue. So you can see with your own eyes, but if you can be as wide open eyes. But if you're not listening to all of what's going on in the world, then you might as well just be blind, because you can see whatever you want to see. I could probably go into that same city and show him where the homeless people are if he looked. So you may want to go look at it. There are shelters there. There's probably food banks there. Step out. I mean, I'm not sure what this part of California it is, but I'm sure there's plenty of people that are working that are not driving Mercedes. Ask all the people inside the stores whose hours were cut during the holidays in the mall. Ask them what their lifestyle is like. So, I mean, I find it personally offensive. His comments were offensive to me. He can call me and we can talk about it. But I found it to be extremely arrogant and disappointing. So I don't know what else to say to that. But he needs to look outside of his bubble. That's all I got to say.
Yeah, with the 269 Walmart closings and the other announcements of different chains closings and shutting down, and I mean the writing's on the wall. We can see that things are not all well and good in the world of economics, and now we're so interconnected globally that when we see the Asian markets take a dive, it affects the U.S. markets and vice versa.
Yeah.
And the trends are if we follow the trends, they are looking bad. So
I mean, I
would say, hey, Doug, Ross, let me interject this. Number one, he doesn't know how many of those cars are financed. Number two, he doesn't know how many of the mortgages are in default. California, in parts of it, is the shiny veneer, okay? It's like Las Vegas at night with all the neon, and in this case, the Mercedes, the BMWs, whatever, but when the veneer is stripped off, I think this is what you're saying too, Ross, it's just an illusion. Now, also the attitude sucks, okay? Oh, this will probably really set somebody off.
Stephen, in fairness, I might have thrown in some tude there, okay? I might have read the attitude.
Okay, but here's the deal. This is the deal with Christians. I've got mine. I'm okay. ISIS isn't in my backyard yet. I'm sorry, I'm sorry that these people are dying, but the Bible says they're going to be martyrs. I said, well, you better pray that you stand in the place where these people are calling on Jesus before their heads are cut off, that you have the same faith as them. I find it, can I say something? Ross, you nailed it, brother. You nailed it. I encounter that all the time. Do you really think someone with a couple 100 million cares about the people that are in the homeless shelters? Do you really think the people who have mega churches care? Now, I understand there's some token, stuff, but here's the deal. people are going to say, didn't we feed the hungry? Didn't we do this? She's going to say, hey, depart from me. I never knew you. And see, that's why, look at the war in the church, and this is the war that's in the church is also, I would say, carried out in the natural, what things look like. I'll tell you what, remember this, the devil is a master of illusion, and my guess is the majority of those fancy cars are all financed. My guess is I used to spend a lot of time in California, and a friend of mine, Alan, he drove limousines, and he said, Steve, he said, these guys will take $100 bills and put them over a wad of $1 bills and try and be flashy. And he said, but you know what? At the end of the night, they can't even pay their limousine bill. So, and I'm talking places like up in, you know, the higher dollar areas. I'm not talking about, you know, dumpy areas in LA or anything. I'm talking about high dollar places. So things are not as they seem.
And I would encourage the gentleman that wrote that to go and buy a little less of a car and go volunteer somewhere and help people out with that extra money. Go help a family and meet the mortgage and maybe fix the person that had the other where his house is being foreclosed on. They'd seized his $1,000. Go help that brother. If you're a Christian, go help that brother. Reach out to some others and not worry about what you have. Worry about what you can give to somebody else.
Ross, you just made a great point, and too often people are too busy looking at what their neighbor has compared to what they don't, when they should be looking at what their neighbor has to make sure that they have enough. And if people were to cut back on the luxury items, you know, do you really need a Mercedes SUV? You know, when you can go buy a Ford SUV that does the same thing basically for, you know, $30,000 less and use that money to feed other people. People don't want to take those personal sacrifices, and until they do, we're going to continue to see ourselves implode the way we are imploding.
Let me give you a statistic. I read it on Sunday in preparation for this show. In 2010, it took 388 billionaires to equal all of the value, all the money owned of the other 3.5 billion people in the world. 388 people had as much money as 3.5 billion. You know what it is this year? 62 people have more money or equal money to 3.5 billion people in the world. Now, if you think that's okay, more power to you. You can talk to God about all that. But personally, I think that's wrong. You know, my wife and I were talking about it, but this is why we want to be here. What we're doing is help people take control of their money, set themselves free, get out of this trap, and do the right thing. So, anyways, any other questions, Steve? Doug, before I get angry.
No, you. Welcome to my world.
You know, and again, to the last email, I threw some attitude in there, but you know, yeah, you're exactly right, and we are living in a time, and Steve, you said it right on the money. You know, I got mine. Too bad for you, and it's that attitude. And Ross, you said it too. It's that attitude. You know, we need to get our hands dirty out there. We need to help others. And even if you don't believe in prepping, or if you don't believe in whatever, if you think you're going to be out of here for the bad times, then for crying out loud, help others that you think are going to be left behind. I mean, that's the Christian thing to do, isn't it? You know. So bottom line, yeah. I mean, so we got about 10 minutes left of the show. You guys go ahead and submit your final statements.
Ross, go ahead and tell people how to contact you.
Sure. You can reach us through survival401k.com. There's some buttons you can push to contact us button, and there's a get started button. So you can reach us there. That'll send an email so somebody will reach you within 24 hours. You can call our number at 844-650-5733, and that'll ring us. And I told this on other shows, and people have felt it. You call, you will talk to me. I promise you will talk to me at least once, if not twice. Sometime at a point I'll turn you over to some others to help you with your paperwork. But you will always talk to me first, at least once. So I promise you that, and I have never failed on that. So I have plenty of customers that will attest to that. Before it's too late, I mean, I'm not going to put a big sell on it. If you don't believe it's in the wind, you don't believe what we're talking about, then don't call. I don't want to try to convince you. If you feel it in your spirit and it's on our website, you can feel it in your spirit, your friends feel it too, then give us a call. We'll talk to you about it. We'll hear your situation. We'll hear your story. And if you think what we have will fit for you, then we'll proceed. If we don't think it's a good fit for you, then we'll tell you, I'll try to send you somebody who might be able to fit for you, or you may just be out of luck. So if you just give us a call, we'll talk to you about your situation, and we're glad to steer you in the right direction.
And I got to just say, you know what, Ross, I've heard from from people. When I say a lot, I mean relative to they love your service, and they're astounded. They're amazed at what you can do for them. Folks, Ross Powell, survival401k.com, survival401k.com. You can regain control of your finances, and in this time, you need to do that. Steve, my brother, drive it home.
Well, I think it's a time for seeking the Lord while he may be found. I think that given the my micro outburst, the amount of denial and the amount of trying to kill the messengers. Listen, the day will come when there won't be any more messengers on talk radio, because we know what is the future for talk radio. My goal is to get people out of harm's way. Ross's goal is to get people out of harm's way and be able to maintain that which they've acquired in life. Because, see, here's the deal. It's amazing. They take your money. They take your life. All money, basically, is a measure of someone's skill. If you inherit it, your grandfather, your parents, somebody had to earn that money. The work ethic generation is gone. And, I want to share something neat. Romy, my friend Romy Zaret, her dad is 91. He's a World War II vet, a B-17 pilot. You know that France just spent a lot of time and effort to run him down to give him the Legion of Honor medal. God bless you, Romy. I was so thrilled that, one of the things we don't appreciate the price these people have made that with their lives. And when she said to her dad, she said, "Dad, you're a hero of mine." He said, "Honey," I'm paraphrasing this, "the heroes didn't come back." The idea that a nation would find one man, by the way, there aren't that many living B-17 pilots, And so I just want to take the time to honor her dad, because this man is amazing. And I called her and I said, "Romy, you tell your dad I really, really, really thank him." And I also said, "Ask me, he wants to go for a helicopter ride." So the point is that, when you've got men that are humble but they have paid the price, 91 years old, and a nation seeks you out to give you the Medal of Honor, that's the equivalent of our Congressional Medal of Honor. The thing is, I think that deserves to be said. So I just want to honor that man, and I thank God, because people don't understand how much intercession that she puts into this show, Doug. She covers you, she covers me, and it's different than praying. When an intercessor is called by God, I want to put this into perspective, they literally cover your life with theirs. They're taking the arrows. They're taking the bullets. They're taking Satan's full frontal attack and covering with their life. She's the only intercessor I ever knew that had a spray plane fly over her at just a little bit above treetop level on the highway when she was coming to Whitestone. She's the only woman I know as an intercessor who had the boys in the helicopter flying over, filming her at, above treetop level. I think she was out there shaking her fist at them. The point is that this is the kind, and I say this is the kind of attitude we need. It's the same thing. Ladies and gentlemen, there is a war going on for your finances. There is a war going on for your soul. You've got to take this stuff seriously. And for the attitude that Ross so rightly gave the best answer for, someone else's arrogance will not deliver you. To my dreams and visions, I just posted Randy Conway's poem, and I want you to pray over that. I want you to read it, and I want you to think it. Husbands, any man that doesn't provide for his family is worse than an infidel. Any man that says, "I'm going to just burn up my inheritance and my kids can just fend for themselves." I know people like that. And I said, that's a selfish thing. Now, there are trust babies in Montana. Trust babies, somebody has just been left, literally gazillions of dollars, and all they do is get high, get stoned, and go skiing. I know some of them. There are obviously trust babies that don't do that. But remember this, everything we have enjoyed about freedom, everything we have enjoyed about the blessing of living in this country, all those blessings are vanishing before your eyes. And just because you're eating filet mignon, there are people eating out of garbage cans. Just because you're sleeping and I'm sleeping in a very nice bed, there are people that have no place to lay their head. And by the way, I'm not a do-gooder, goody two-shoes. I step up to the pump. I have a family that sponsors this show, and they don't want me to tell who their names are, and rightly so. But these guys have given, literally mid-six figures away in truckloads of food to send to the food banks on the West Coast. That's, Doug, the kind of people we got listening. I got news for you. At this point in my life, I'm 65. The only thing that counts is doing everything I can do to help whoever I can help. I know I can't help everybody, and I'm talking about prayer, teaching them and stuff. Now, there are people that absolutely are what are called perma-jerks, okay? They're like a weed. No matter what show I'm on, they always, grow up. But it's not the perma-weeds, it's the wheat that I'm concerned with. There will be a harvest, ladies and gentlemen, and with what measure you sow, that's what you'll reap. Doug, you have sown so graciously to so many people. Unfortunately, some of them have used your platform against you. By the grace of God, I'm so excited to see, and I believe there is a transformation taking place. And ladies and gentlemen, I can tell you, I have known Ross Powell. He can get you out of financial harm's way. Go to survival401k.com. My website is stevequayle.com. If you want me to call you, if you want me to talk to you, just send me an email, steve777@stevequayle.com. Put in the metals. I'm going to tell everybody this. If you want to buy $1,000 or less of metals, don't. Buy food. Buy food. Buy food. That'll take the critics out. The point is that food is going to be the most cost-prohibitive, staple to get. It's going to be impossible to get. So, ladies and gentlemen, my prayers for you, except those of you who have chosen hell as your mouthpiece, is that God will protect you, that God will keep you hidden, that God will grant you dreams and visions, in the night seal your instruction, and that every single person who loves Jesus, that has listened to this show all these years, will be hidden away in the secret place of the Most High God. I don't have time to fight with this guy, that guy, any other guy, and I don't have time to enter into someone else's fight when I didn't create the mess. And I'm sorry, but we must be about our Father's business. If we're about God's business, then where's the time to be so involved in other people's business? God bless.